A regular meeting of City Council for Monday, March 11th to order. Our first item on the agenda this morning is our delegations 2.1. We have Staff Sergeant Worrell here, and I understand Dirks and Dan are out this morning.
Yes, I apologize. As luck would have it, we had a big car activation this morning, and our soon-to-be retired Dirks is working, so he's not going to be.
All right, so we'll bring him back in next meeting and hopefully get to send him off with a little thank you.
Absolutely.
Good morning, welcome.
Thank you. So I requested a quick meeting with you just to bring you up to date on where I am with planning our strategic priorities for the next year. Just trying to make sure that you're involved and you have the opportunity to provide any input or concerns you may have as we're building those strategic priorities. As I told you before, I need to have them in place and ready to go for April 1st. So the clock is ticking. Based on our crime trends over the last 5 years, and particularly over the last year, I'm leaning towards the following priorities. The first one being organized crime. The reason I'm leaning towards that is we've seen a 400% increase in our contact with members of organized crime over the last 5 years. Very large increase, and as you know, we are seeing some violent offenses and gun-related offenses here in Dawson Creek. Particularly or notable was in November when we had multiple gun-related offenses and a victim that was shot multiple times. The second priority that I'm looking at is property crime. The reason I'm looking at property crime is 45% of all of our calls for service involve property crime. So by dealing with or focusing on property crime, it's going to have the biggest effect on our overall crimes for service. I'm also looking at that as well because over the last 5 years, our property crime caseloads per member have increased by 63%. So it's a very substantial increase on our load for our members and our investigations that our members are taking. The third priority that I'm looking at is mental health. And as I've explained to you before, over the last year, our mental health calls have increased by 155%. It's a huge increase, a very large taxing on our resources and on our regular members. It's something that we really need to look at before it gets even more out of control. So those are kind of the three priorities that I'm looking at. I have provided those to our detachment members, the constables, and our staff and employees for their own input as well. Just so you know, I do have an interagency meeting scheduled on Wednesday with stakeholders. So I've kind of reached out to multiple agencies and organizations in Dawson Creek, including the city. And we're going to be having a meeting on Wednesday at 2 p.m. to kind of go over the priorities, objectives, and initiatives and get some input and hear concerns from various partners and agencies and stakeholders throughout the city of Dawson Creek. So I believe your worship is going to be attending that?
Yes.
Okay. So that's kind of where I am right now. I'll be providing you a final draft of our priorities and our objectives and supported initiatives at the COW meeting, which is scheduled for March 25th, with an expected implementation of those for April 1st. And that's all I had for you. I just wanted to make sure that you were brought up to date on where I am with those right now. And pending any questions or concerns, that's all I have. So.
Thank you, Damon. Any questions, Council? Councillor Lexner?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks, Damon, for the update. You mentioned your stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders you're meeting with?
I reached out to fire, ambulance, emergency, the emergency section at the hospital, people that we work with often, the city, bylaws, social services, child and family services, kind of everybody that I can think of that would be on that list that we really interact with and deal with person and property issues within Dawson Creek.
Good process.
I'm certainly open to suggestions to get more invitations out if you have any ideas of who else I can send that to.
No, it was more for my interest to see. It sounds like you've covered it. Another quick one. Mental health is a huge issue. Mm-hmm. I mean, not just for our city, but across the province, probably across the country if we want to expand it. Our focus on that and the challenge it brings to policing in Dawson Creek is one of the concerns I have is the ability when we talk about this, and we know it's going to be a discussion point tonight at our meeting with the staffing of the RCMP and so on. Mental health is a provincial issue, and I'll speak on the provincial side. It's a provincial health issue. That, in my mind, hasn't been dealt with to the extent it needs to be, and it transcends governments, so it isn't pointing the finger at a new one or an old one. It continues, it looks to me like it's a way of downloading costs to municipalities because the time, and we've talked about this before, that either a member or more than one member is consumed with this, takes them off the street to do the... Is there any thought in your process as one of your priorities as to what we can do together to approach either the provincial government or... I think that's something we've got to do as a council, as a city, and maybe even broader as a province, Your Worship, to say, look, policing is a significant cost for every municipality, but you're downloading costs on us, maybe unknowingly, But is there any thoughts you've done as you've worked through your career on this as to what mental health, or how we could maybe be a leader in that field to say we're going to change things up a bit?
I think that we're recognizing right now that it's an issue, and we have to look at it, and that breaking down the problem and determining solutions, like I said, with our stakeholders and the partners that are involved is going to be the next step. So if we identify it as an issue and as a priority, we can focus a little bit more time and attention to find out why it's really happening. Like I said, who needs to claim some responsibility and assist us with the issue. So right now we're recognizing, I think it's an issue that we need to deal with, and it's occupying police resources. So
All right. Okay.
I agree with you.
All right. Thanks.
Jeremy and then Councillor Wilbur.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you again, Staff Sergeant Morrill. Just to follow up on Councillor Lekstrom's point with respect to your stakeholder meeting on Wednesday, of the people from Northern Health you're meeting with, are the physicians, anyone from the Physicians Advisory Committee?
I spoke with someone in charge of the emergency department. Her name is Emily. I don't recall her last name offhand, but she was in charge of the emergency department.
Okay, because I recall you mentioned that physicians are the ones who can issue a pickup order, and they kind of, the way Northern Health works, they're all independent contractors that are essentially working in the hospital, so they kind of have their own.
So who do you recommend I get a hold of?
Kendra Kiss.
Well, Kendra Kiss is the health services advisor at the hospital,
Okay.
and she could probably put you in touch
Okay.
with the physician representative. But if that's one piece of, are we getting more calls because the practices among the physicians have changed, they might want to be in on that discussion.
Sounds
And
good.
if you
I'll
can
reach
get
out
them
to
to
her
show
today,
up
so-
with 2 days' notice.
Councillor Wilbur.
Thank you.
Someone will, they're pretty good.
Yeah.
Along that same note, and I know we discussed it at higher levels when we're at UBCM, but Spickers is probably somebody to have at that table during those discussions, because they offer a lot of after services. So after you've been victimized, or just different things going on in the community. So they're kind of that entity that people forget about, that are providing a lot of service to the community. And so that might be someone to give a call and see if they have someone that could be at those discussions. Yep, right here.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So Kendra Kiss and Spickers.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll get the staff will make a note of it, and we've got some contact information for that. And
Perfect.
We'll flip that over to you after
Absolutely.
the day today, Damon. Thank you. Anything further? So thank you. This is the strategic police plan as part of our interaction and buy-in to that plan for our community. And so I really appreciate Damon's taking us on, and I look forward to Wednesday, and then the end of the month we'll be back in front of council with it and get it ready for implementation. So thank you. Appreciate you coming in this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you make a note of that? Next delegation this morning, 2.2, we have Sean Henry in from the Dawson Creek Judo Association. Morning, Sean.
Morning.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me. So I'm here on behalf of the Dawson Creek Judo Association. We are hosting our third, what I'd like to call annual judo tournament here in Dawson Creek this year, coming up on May 4th. And we're looking to increase the value to our participants and encourage more people to come from afar. And one of those things that we'd like to do, well, what I'm asking from council is some support in terms of offering some swim passes as part of participation in the tournament. And so we've been growing every year, and I think we're expecting a little over 100 competitors this year, and probably 50 to 60% of which coming from outside of the Dawson Creek area. We've had participants come from 100 Mile House, Grand Prairie, Prince George primarily in the past, and just made some connections this past weekend in Edmonton with Judo Yukon, and are talking to them about having them bring down a team as well. So We're hoping to continue to grow the tournament, and I think one of the biggest things for us looking forward is that it becomes sort of a sanctioned event where our competitors here locally and others can earn points towards provincial and national team participation and that kind of thing, as well as that makes it a bigger draw for athletes coming from all corners of the province. So last year when we hosted it, particularly the team from Prince George, which comprised all 3 of their clubs, came up and they really liked the fact that we were at the Encana Event Center, which we're going to be at again, but that the pool was right there, and so it was like a really all-encompassing sort of event for them where they could go to the pool and hang out there and have a good time there, as well as be close by to their hotels and everything like that as well. So we're hoping this year to get council support in terms of offering those swim passes. Our costs have gone up a little bit this year for the tournament in terms of the venue and some other pieces. And so it would be really nice to provide that opportunity.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for coming in. Questions, Council? Anybody? Councilor Ekstrom?
Just a
Councilor Javeco?
Quick one. So, and thank you for the presentation. Is it, you're looking for a swim pass for every competitor or a certain group? Was there a number you had in mind?
Yeah, so sorry, I should have been more clear on that. Would be hoping to offer like a youth, because predominantly it's youth that are coming up to compete in this
Okay.
tournament. We had sort of a demo for some adults, but probably about 100 we were thinking of the youth, like single-use swim passes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Javeco?
Answers my question.
When the tournament is 1 day,
May
2 days, 3 days, Sean?
Well, the tournament itself goes over 1 day, but the team from Prince George stayed 2 nights with us
Okay.
last time. And so that was really good connections for the clubs here in town as well.
Good. Any other questions? Thank you. So we appreciate you coming in this morning, obviously, and I'd love to see the organization beginning to thrive and lots of activity and really great job to the volunteers and the organizers and you guys. And so we'll bring it back under Mayor's business, the request to deal with it under later in the agenda.
Thank you, appreciate your time.
Thanks for coming in.
Very much.
Our next delegation, 2.3, we have Chelsea Modishaw, Kayla Boyd, and Nick LaRose from the City of Dawson Creek in attendance regarding World Water Day proclamation. Morning.
Good morning.
Welcome, welcome. Thanks for coming in this morning.
Thanks
Always
for
a
having
good
us.
opportunity to raise the awareness. Whereas an international day to celebrate fresh water was recommended at the 1992 United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, and the United Nations General Assembly responded by designating March 22nd, 1993 as the first World Water Day. And whereas World International Water Day is held annually on March 22nd as a means of focusing attention on the importance of fresh water and advocating for the sustainable management of freshwater resources. And whereas each year World Water Day highlights a specific aspect of fresh water, and this year's theme is Nature for Water. The City of Dawson Creek is inviting the community to participate in upcoming events and encourages all residents in and around the surrounding community to show the world they care by conserving water. Now therefore, I do hereby proclaim March 22nd, 2019 as World Water Day in Dawson Creek. Thanks, Chelsea.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks, Nick, thank you. Floor is yours.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for having us. So we wanted to just let yourself and council know some of the events that we have happening. We have 2 events going on. So the first is on World Water Day. We're going to be offering water treatment plant tours for staff. And if there's any council that would be interested in as well, if you haven't been out. And one of the reasons why we really want to do this is because we want to increase the understanding for staff of where our water comes from and how it's treated, so build confidence in our water supply system, but also to educate staff and get them a bit more knowledgeable on our water infrastructure investments. So where's our money gone and what are we doing with it? Who are our operators? What is the role that we play? So that will be happening on World Water Day. And we've sent out an invitation to staff, and we'll see how much interest we receive from that. And then secondly, I'll let Kayla take it away.
We also have a coloring contest taking place now, so sheets can be picked up downstairs at City Hall and dropped off back here at City Hall by March 22nd, and all those who participate will be entered into a contest to win a 10-punch swim pass.
Is there a mayor's class category?
One.
That's what I'm hoping.
Your worship,
Stay in the
I
lines.
believe I saw the coloring contest posted on the city website too, so people could actually download it at home and color it.
Yeah,
and bring it
and
in too.
our Water and Environmental Department Facebook page as well, we've shared it. And we shared it at the Science World education event where we probably handed out almost 200 sheets. So
Okay.
even if people aren't submitting them, the fact is that our coloring sheet is based on our system. So it shows the Kiskatna into our water treatment plant, distribution, Kuskoopie, and then all the way back out to the Arctic Ocean. So hopefully people are making the connection between our water and world water, right? It's one system. So awesome.
Great. Thanks, you guys. Appreciate you coming in this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
2.4, our delegation wasn't able to get here this morning, so. 2.4, we have Ryan McIver as the general manager of the Tourism Dawson Creek in attendance. Good morning, Ryan.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So the letter as part of your package is not unique to some of the requests that come forward with respect to our activities. Of interest, though, the reason why that we're here today to seek your support to go bid on Minerals North and NCLGA is due to the fact that they are it's part of the requirements or some of the aspects of the bid is the affirmative response from Mayor and Council in terms of letter of support with respect to hosting or bidding on these events. Both events, NCLGA has been hosted here before and provides a significant number, as we've attached here, hotel rooms across and economic activity through the event to Dawson Creek, as well as Minerals North. Minerals North this year is in Chetwynd, and then it bounces, as you can see through the report, across the province. We are seeking out a couple of years. We went, if upon your approval, we'll be bidding, depending on the timing of the success and our successful bid, ensuring that both events are off each other's year. So they're not happening within the same year because they're during the same time frame within May. NCLJ has been hosted here before. It was a big success from what wasn't part of the actual NCLJ committee or the process. I know Councillor Wilbur was, but I do believe it was a very big success. And I also do believe that Minerals North would be as well. So I think that from our aspect, from the event and sport tourism side, of bringing people from outside the community to stay multiple nights, to increase that economic activity and to spin off those economic benefits, whether it be designing the conference to leverage additional lights or get them out in the community to see it, eat, drink, and be merry. Showcase some of the other aspects of the community. We believe it's worthwhile for us to put our hat forward, so to speak, and bid on these two conferences in the coming years.
Thank you, Ryan. Questions? Councillor Wilbur?
I'm happy to see that you're looking at hosting NCLGA. I will say, just to you and my colleagues, that I know the board of directors would be very happy to see bids coming in further down the road. It's easier to plan and lets them kind of get their head around it too. But my question to you, Ryan, is the last time we hosted, it was done more regionally. So we brought in someone from Kuskoopie, Tumbler Ridge, Chetwynd. Is that something that you would be looking at in that bid? Is that you would incorporate the region as, yeah, and
I
hosting?
think right now, from our perspective, that it would be a Dawson Creek bid, but I think that it only makes sense to provide a regional aspect to it. But right now, the lead would be us. And as we move forward through the process and when I think that will, as we look to design not the conference per se, but get to that point, that we'll have those conversations with the other surrounding, not municipalities, but elected.
Areas. Okay. Okay. The reason I ask is because the tours we had last time took people out to those other communities, and as a result, those people, some of those people stayed an extra 2 days in Dawson Creek to go back and visit our area. So I just want to make that note. But I really appreciate that tourism's looking at this, and I can tell you firsthand the board would be happy to know that a community or an organization's looking that far ahead to plan for their AGM.
Further questions? So, thank you, Ryan. We'll bring this back forward under Mayor's business for further discussion and direction.
Thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
2.5 delegation, we have Karina Wingerak, resident of Dawson Creek, in attendance regarding the RCMP reduction of positions. So, good morning, Karina. Welcome. Good to have you here. So the floor is yours, and because we're recorded, we like, if you can just have a chair and speak into the mic. That way, it's picked up for folks that are listening in later on.
Thank you everyone for having me here today to speak in front of you all. It's my pleasure to be here. My name is Karina Wingerak, and my family has been in the Dawson Creek community for close to 100 years now, and I myself have grown up in the community for a very long time. I won't date myself. I'm a spouse of a fellow RCMP member who was supposed to be here today with our furry friend, but unfortunately he wasn't able to make it. Mayor Bumstead, members of council, and esteemed guests, my intention here today is not to point fingers or play the blame game regarding the proposed RCMP position cuts. My intention is to bring to light some of the challenges that we, as the spouses of the RCMP, have noticed within the Dawson Creek detachment. My hope is that you will take this information and reconsider the proposal to the cut positions. I will not be speaking about crime statistics with you today, but I will be addressing interpersonal, psychological, relationship, and well-being challenges these members, along with their families, are facing. The information spoken about today has been gathered collectively from members and spouses, and we all agree that this is a budget cut we simply cannot afford. As of recent, another RCMP member has taken his life. This is close to home when I have known members who have had these thoughts about committing suicide because they cannot think clearly. There is a direct correlation between trauma and the time that you have off to recuperate. When you have one trauma after the other, you are unable to de-stress, debrief, and appropriately recuperate before going back into the field. One trauma after the other, especially when you are working overtime to cover these minimums, forces a person to lose the ability to appropriately recuperate. And when you are not able to see the people that you love, trust, and care for, this also leads to additional stress. You then bury the stress deeper and deeper, and this creates burnout. Psychologically, it is recommended to have time in between traumatic instances to try to debrief, de-stress, and recuperate to decrease burnout. If these things are not done appropriately, burnout leads to medical conditions and psychological stress, which can lead to depression, anxiety, and many other severe conditions. If we give these RCMP officers enough time to recuperate by keeping these positions and having a full force, we are actually giving our force a better leg up into having a healthier lifestyle, which leads to a higher morale, which leads to a safer community. If we don't give them the ability to rest, recuperate, and spend time together with their family, they are at higher risk for burnout, PTSD, and other psychological disorders. This is proven from burnout studies, PTSD studies, and studies that have to do with high stress, high trauma positions. People that deal with trauma day in and day out don't just get better at it. It is something that you don't just get used to. You don't get used to seeing people die. You don't get used to seeing children being hurt. You don't get used to seeing the bad parts of humanity. You just get better at covering it up. These things happen. I understand this, but we need to respect and protect the people who deal with these things. We need to care for these people. We need to give them the time and the ability to rest, to care for themselves, and give their family time with them. By keeping the numbers at a minimum, we'll only be contributing to what the members are already experiencing. I would also like to bring attention to the time and energy it takes to investigate a file, and that the majority of the time, the RCMP are the first to arrive on a scene. Dead bodies of adults and children, abused men and women, abused children, fatal car accidents, informing families their loved ones have died, watching people die in their arms, the recent shootings and drug violence. These are just a few examples that the Dawson Creek members experience with just the minimums. Could you imagine having to deal with those? I understand that these minimums have been the norm for a few years now, and as a spouse of a member, and as a longtime resident, I would like to see these positions left out of the budget cuts, and I would also like to see them filled and keep them filled, so we can bring the minimums up. If we operate at the minimums, the community will be receiving minimal service. Fortunately, the new detachment commander has finally filled these positions, which has made a significant improvement on detachment morale, and to take away these positions would be, in my opinion, a slap in the face to the commander, the members, and the community. If these positions were taken away, what will happen when the city realizes they need these positions back? What will the processes be? How long will it take? And I hope this is something that you all have considered. Dawson Creek used to be a posting where members wanted to stay, and now it has gained a negative reputation due to being short-staffed. I'm going to take the last few minutes to share the toll all of this has on the families. It is safe to say that it is normal to take for granted birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays. It is not normal to miss these moments and expect it not to take a toll on relationships with your kids and your spouse, and maintain a resemblance of a normal life. The families of the members, including myself, appreciate and look forward to our spouses' days off because we know they can be few and far between. The members' children often experience disappointment because their father or mother have to miss out on special presentations, sporting events, and family outings because they are out there protecting our community. Can you imagine how that could affect your family? I have the privilege to personally know these members and their families, and many have evolved into lifelong friends. With minimal resources, these members suit up daily and put their lives at risk for the community. They keep their heads held high and do the best that they can. I think we can all agree that this situation needs to improve for the members' sake, for the family's sake, and for the community's sake. Please keep in mind that your family is a part of this community. In closing, I fully recognize that police officers choose their profession, and I also recognize that if they don't like it, they can quit. Some people try being a police officer only to find out that it isn't for them, and kudos for them for having the courage to admit that. We firmly believe that being a police officer isn't a job, it is a calling. And if you become a police officer solely to pay the bills, most people won't want you in their detachment or patrolling their community. Being a police officer is recognizing that you will see the worst side of humanity that society has to offer, and you accept that as your normal. Chances are good that when a police officer starts their career, they have thought about these things, but didn't quite know what it actually meant until they've experienced it. It takes a special kind of person to do this job, one that isn't normal. I hope what I have shared with you today will help you understand why these positions are so important and why the proposed position cuts should be reconsidered.
Thank you, Karina. Great job.
Thank you.
Questions from council? Councillor Wilbur?
I don't have a question, but I thank you for everything that you have said. Unlike some of my colleagues, I don't believe in these cuts. I believe that our police officers are important to our community. But what I really want to say is thank you, to the families, because you are sacrificing along when your spouses are at work. So thank you for being there when they do come home, and thank you for the sacrifices you're making.
Thank you.
Thanks to you guys thank you for coming in today to give a perspective that is an important perspective for, I think, all of us to hear, and appreciate that that role that the people who serve our community go through and live through. And so it's important for us to hear that. It's important for council to have that as part of the things that they do when they consider these decisions they're making. So we really appreciate you coming in this morning and telling that side of the story that's important for people who are going to be watching, as well as for council as we move forward with these decisions. So thank you. I know it's difficult, and we appreciate you doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So now I think Dirks here? Dirks is here. Can Dirks come up? Nice.
Is it the next order?
Yeah, no, the mayor always maintains the prerogative to amend the agenda as required, and if Dirks is here, Dirks is getting in. Yeah.
Well, we had to go downstairs to get it. Do you have a dog phone?
I do have a dog bone because I'm not going. Dirks is a working dog.
Yeah.
Safety, eh?
He literally had to work.
Could have saved some color on the ink and just got black and white.
He was dreaming of toys and biscuits, and they made him go to
Yeah.
work.
They're working dogs. They don't, that's what they know.
He's ran away, apparently.
He's like, he said I was retired, I'm out here.
Watch sniffing dog or what?
No, probably a tracker.
Full service.
Full service?
Yeah. Hopefully.
Are you worried, Paul?
If he runs straight for it,
Coffee illegal now. Are these dogs going to have to be retrained? How's that work? Stressing out a lot of otherwise law-abiding citizens.
somebody put something in Paul's
We're the only one
drawer.
There he goes. There he goes.
There he is.
There he goes. Hey, bud. Hey, mister. Hey, bud.
Yeah,
Dirks.
he's got it in
He's
his
like, "Hey,
drawer,
Dirks."
Dirks.
Hey, Dirks. Hey, mister. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, you got it, don't you? Here it is.
We're just constantly.
Right.
Now
He's a
Dirks
little
has just
wound up.
finished working. So Dirks is, oh, yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the end of my finger. So it's not very often, honestly, that we get to see a retirement. So it's very good to have Dirks here. And Dan, who's been in our community now for 5 or 6 years, and really appreciate the fact that they made the commitment to our community, and Dirks has done that, served us well. And so we want to give him a certificate of recognition. City of Dawson Creek recognizes Dirks for his years of service.
Thank you very much.
Hey, oh, it's you, Lextra.
Dirks,
You want to sit? Sit. Stay. Hey, bud. Sit.
Oh, good boy. And he's finished when?
The first week of April.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well,
He's pretty much in semi-retirement right
Yeah.
now. We're taking 2 weeks off next week,
oh, good deal.
and then he's going to work the first week of April, and then heading off to training with the new guy.
7, 8 years, is that about what they'll?
Yeah, around 8. He's had health issues in the last couple of years, so
Okay.
I don't want to stretch it too much, and I don't want to retire him
Yeah,
ill or injured.
yeah.
So, yeah, they're just going to retire at just under 8 years old.
Well, he's done a great job for our community, and we want to wish him the best.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan.
There's the baby. The baby got kisses. Thank you.
Councillor Javetkov, Councillor Javetkov.
He was more interested in Lekstrom.
Had a close look at you, Greg.
It's legal.
Thanks, Dan. So that ends our delegations, and now we're on to new councillor business. Anyone? Councillor Parslow?
In response to Councillor Leckstrom's request, all of us received some tables, and I would need some time with the help of our Chief Financial Officer understanding one of the tables. So I'm wondering when we might have the opportunity for that sort of questions. Maybe later on in the agenda, but at some meeting anyway, before we
Well, certainly, I think it's going to be part of that budget deliberations as we get into March the 20th, I think, or as we have a special.
Correct,
yeah. Could do it at that time, or if council want to introduce it now and we can have it brought forward later, I can bring it back under mayor's business if you'd like to have some discussion or conversation about it.
I would like to have some discussion before tonight.
Yeah, I'm just not sure that all of council have had the opportunity to,
It was emailed to us.
because we just went out on Friday afternoon, and so there may be some members of council that haven't had the chance to kind of read through it. And Councillor Lexon?
Possibly for some help. It was some information I'd requested. Duncan got it out to us. I don't think it would take a great deal of time to explain the numbers. It's just following the chart across. So whether you've looked at it or not, I think probably just a quick explanation of how to read that table would be of great assistance to us. And if we're going to have a discussion today, I believe, with regard to the presentation this evening, Your Worship,
Sure.
we may have a few minutes there just to walk through it so that we can all grab that understanding.
Sure.
Sure. So I'm good to bring it back under mayor's business if you want to make the recommendation that we bring it back to a mayor's business, and then we can have administration, because I don't know that, anyway, so yeah, we'll do it that way.
Okay, if that's acceptable to
You guys okay with that?
Yes, so through your worship, the only thing I might suggest is that maybe we put it on the PowerPoint, is that it wasn't included in the agenda, so the gallery or the media haven't seen it if we're going to discuss it.
Okay, so a motion to bring it back under mayor's business for further review. Councillor Kemp, Councillor Wilbur, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Good. Thank you. Further councillor business? Anybody? Councillor
I just say,
Carroll?
at the invite, thank you, Your Worship, at the invite of Matt Rivard, the owner, I attended the soft opening of Starbuds in the mall yesterday, and I just want to report back to council. It's a really unique space, very clean, very professionally run, very professional in its setup, and I'd encourage anyone in the community who's curious about how this new industry is going to interact with our community. If you have any reservations, go in there. They have a bunch of educational material and staff that are willing to talk to you and hopefully alleviate any concerns. So I just wanted to report that back.
Thank you. Any other new councillor business for anybody?
Ditto.
Thank you. So next on is our minutes of our regular meeting of council for February 25th for adoption. Moved. Councillor Earl, seconded. Councillor Laxton. Any errors or omissions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Any business arising out of those minutes? Councillor Wilbur?
Really just for clarification, I did watch the video and I missed this part and then I caught it while I was reading the minutes. So 7.4.1, and it was regarding the sidewalks. It had got voted down to remove that part from putting them in. So my understanding is this does fall within line of the new OCP, is my understanding, but the sidewalks couldn't be put in because of like electrical boxes that are there, the services are in. So I would just like some clarification on.
Sure.
I did try and look for it in the video, but by the time I went back and forth, because I know we already have an issue in some of our neighborhoods with no sidewalks, and so.
Yeah,
With-
we
yeah,
had a
so
great
if you
discussion
could
about
step-
it. but
yeah.
Duncan can
So through your
explain.
worship, this was a variance for a subdivision that hadn't been titled and was looking to start titling lots. The discussion around the sidewalk was continuity and the fact that those sidewalks would end at some properties that were already developed. There was also some discussion around infrastructure that's existing, and that's where the variance came about. Was a lot of this infrastructure was in the ground. We would need some easement possibly to ensure we weren't putting sidewalks over top of existing infrastructure. Anything else that I've missed on that, Kevin?
Narrow, very narrow right away.
Yeah. Yeah, so those were kind of the key elements of the discussion, I think, and in the
Okay.
end, the sidewalks were not included in that area.
Okay, thank you. I went back and forth, but
Thank you.
kudos on the community that watches our videos, because it's hard to find info. Thank you very much. No,
Thank
I just
you.
wanted clarification.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is correspondence. 6.1, we have a memo from Catherine Spalick from UBCM regarding the UBCM membership dues. Councillor Parslow?
I move that we renew our membership for 2019.
Thank you.
Pay
Second.
dues as presented.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Lexstrom. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 6.2, we have a letter from Pauline Castleman, Community Coordinator from the South Peace Arts Council regarding budget cuts for their fees to service. Councillor
I
Parslow?
move that we receive this for information.
Thank you. Seconded? Councillor Earl? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
There's one other item, if I may.
Yep.
Then that they would like to suggest that the City Arts Liaison sit on the board. I'd like to move that happen.
Okay. And so we'll move that there be a city councillor appointed to the Arts Liaison Committee to sit on their board. And does that require resolution by council or mayor's appointment?
Should have resolution.
Resolution? Okay. So do you want that to line up for you with your
Sure.
South Peace Arts Council
Yeah.
responsibilities? There's an actual kind of component there. Councillor Lexstrom?
I would so move the appointment.
Thank you.
Councillor Parslow?
Seconded, Councillor Kemp. Discussion? You okay with it, Councillor Parslow?
Yeah, absolutely.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 6.3, we have a letter from Connie Patterson, President of the Dawson Creek Exhibition Association regarding the 2019 sponsorship package. Now, we have done some stuff, and there was some stuff done with and for the Exhibition Association, I would say, through the Peachtree Regional District, and we've done some things there in terms of sponsorship, not sponsorship, but support to the Exhibition Association. So just for council's information. Councillor Parslow?
What is the actual request? I should have accessed the fair package, but what is the sponsorship? And aren't we already a sponsor with all the money we put in?
Duncan?
So through your worship, this is a sponsorship request that goes out throughout the community looking for various levels of sponsorship from $500 up to, I think, approximately $10,000. The city in the past has, in 2018, donated in kind, where we've provided services upon request for grass cutting, some of the city equipment. Last year we did some capital as well and demolition of some facilities. In 2017 was the same, spending approximately $100,000 in in-kind services on site. In 2016, we provided that in-kind service, but also used to fund fireworks at that time. So it's shifted a little bit, but we do fund capital and in-kind services.
Can I make a motion to receive for information?
Yes, thank you. Seconded? Councillor Earl? All in favor?
We can't discuss that, eh?
No, we can't discuss receive for information. So, all in favor? Opposed? It's defeated. Go ahead.
I would move for discussion.
Second. Councillor Wilbur, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Go ahead.
If I could, just to be able to ask the question where we land, so if we were to receive this for information, as was talked about, my first thought was we would do nothing as far as sponsorship or in-kind work. Traditionally, if we have contributed in kind, I would like to see us continue. This is a pretty big show for the region, pretty important event for the city of Dawson Creek, the community, the people that live here and the surrounding area. I would like to suggest that, and it's a very difficult motion, so I'm going to look forward to the discussion before that we continue with our in-kind services to help the fair ensure the presentation is as good as it can be. But I'm going to wait to hear other members of council's discussion prior to making a motion like that, because I think it can tie our hands if we tie a number to it and we hit that number and we're halfway through the grass cutting.
So, Councillor Parslow, then, or Duncan, do you want to answer first?
Just for clarification, this is just strictly sponsorship. The in-kind discussion typically happens through the budget, and funding has been included within the budget for that in-kind. So really, we're just talking about this sponsorship package that's in front of you today.
And in the past, where we had given, as an example, 2 or 3 years ago, we did $10,000 towards the fireworks, and we were then, that gave us the sponsorship package for that. But this is just clearly the sponsorship packages that Connie sends out to everyone looking for that support. Councillor Parslow?
The reason why I moved that we receive information is this whole question of our relationship with this group is in the in-camera meeting. We're making progress there, and so I think whatever arrangements will be covered by the contract that we make.
And we've cut the funding out of our grants, sponsorship grants to community organizations where we normally would have done some of this for a sponsorship. Right?
Okay.
Good.
Well, and thank you for that. That discussion has clarified it for me that if we receive for information, it's strictly the sponsorship package. Understanding that, we will continue with our in-kind discussions and carry forward.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Good. Do we need it? We don't need a further motion. Thank you. Reports. We're still 7.1, report number 19029 from the General Manager of Development Services regarding local area service for 112th Avenue, 8th Street to 13th Street paving project. Councillor Parslow.
I'd like to move that report number 19-029 from the General Manager of Development Services, read local area service for 112th Avenue, 8th to 13th Street paving project be received. Further, that staff be directed to amend the existing LAS policy to only be applicable to projects or portions of projects that include an increased level of service above the existing condition. And further, that Council direct staff to apply this new methodology to the 112th Avenue project, which will result in the LAS only applying to the new streetlight portion of the project.
Thank you. Seconded. Councillor Wilbur, discussion. Councillor Parslow.
I'd like to thank Kevin for this, because this is a difficult issue. If we keep with our present paths, it is conceivable that some projects that some roads that need paving will not get paved, and ultimately they will deteriorate and eventually become an increased burden to the taxpaying public. In a sense, we're trapped. You know, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. To me, I think this is a very rational approach to the problem. We will take care of our roads, but where there is a significant improvement to the location, in this case streetlights, that will become an option that the beneficiaries would be paying towards. And so I think it takes care of both considerations: long-term maintenance, long-term planning, but also engaging the people who are going to benefit from any improvements in paying for those improvements. So I think it's a well thought out piece.
Thank you. Councillor Laxton?
Thank you. And speaking to the motion, I believe we have to look at a different approach, Councillor Parslow. I think that over the years, the city has used local improvement with the ability for residents to vote it down. So examples would be, I think most people in Dawson Creek would agree, I think many of our roads are in need of upgrade. The deterioration. We move forward under a local improvement project, and the ability to vote it down seems to occur more often than not. So the residents come together, they decide that we don't want to pay for that, so the road remains. It doesn't get fixed. What that does, though, is add increased costs for every taxpayer in the city, because the maintenance costs then become substantial of that road. So the thought of not looking further, and I'm looking at the option 5, where it could be maybe a combination of an infrastructure type charge that goes across the board, because there are many residents in this community that have paid directly for the pavement in front of their homes or put it on their taxes over a 10-year period. And now the thought that the city is going to say, well, we'll pick up the good chunk of it, but any improvements, I understand that. I think it could be a combination of both. But the thought that people can vote it down and increase the cost to the other taxpayers of the city, I don't believe that's their intent. I think it's a misunderstanding that I don't want to pay $100 or $200 or $6,000 immediately, so I'm voting this down. But what it does is the maintenance cost is substantial. Once your road reaches the point of the base deterioration, you're no longer looking at a recap of asphalt, you're doing a full dig. So instead of spending $1 million on a road, we're spending $2 or $3 million on a road. So I'm going to speak against the motion as it's presently put. I'm putting forward my concerns. I think we need to look at an infrastructure type charge similar to what we do with water and sewer across the board, so that we have a fund that we can look at paving our roads and infrastructure when needed, and not have the ability for the residents to say, I just don't want that right now, and increase the cost to the entire tax base of the city. So I'll listen to council for further discussion on this.
Thank you. Duncan, can you give a bit of a high-level overview of this recommendation?
Sure. So, through your worship, LAS has been around at the city, I think, from 2002, as I see the first approval by council, and it's had many different forms. And Kevin, I'll ask to help me out a little bit, but at one point, the cost to the residents was significantly more than where it's at today, where they were responsible for more than just the pavement portion of the LAS. Today, as the bylaws written, or as the policy lands, is they're responsible just for that paving portion and anything new. And the intent of including new infrastructure, the recommendation that the LAS would provide for new infrastructure is you have many or varying levels of service throughout the community, whether it be gravel roads in some areas or some roads without sidewalks or without lighting, and this would apply to those areas. If there are a group of residents looking for a improvement to their neighborhood under this recommendation, an LAS would be required to cover that, and in order for that project to take place. As far as a infrastructure charge, this is something we would have to look at, and I don't know exactly what that option entails, but if that were something that council were interested in, we would have to bring some more information back to figure out how and the metrics of doing that. Kevin, have I missed anything on the LAS? I think we've got it.
Thank you, Duncan. Further comments? Councillor Javetkov?
Yeah, I don't agree with the motion either. We've got areas, a number of areas in the city that are still gravel roads. We've got areas in the city that have open ditches, and to single them out to use the LAS process for those areas, I think it's defeating the purpose of the notion of improving the city. So an example is the Michael subdivision between the Safeway store and the fairgrounds, that whole area there. To me, it's a benefit to the city, it's a benefit to the overall taxpayers to do the improvements in there and increase the assessed value of those properties, collect more taxes from now into perpetuity. So the notion of not improving those areas based on a negative vote, it doesn't make sense to me. You know, we've had situations, the subdivision between 15th Street and 17th Street, between 102nd Avenue and Alaska Avenue, that subdivision was all improved and the assessments have gone up, the vacant lots are all filled up, the return to the city is significant each year, now into forever. I guess singling out, I just don't agree with it. I think the LAS process has run its course. It was originally implemented because of a shortage of funds. And I think a system such as, you know, an infrastructure charge or whatever that applies in general, that works similar to the sewer and water fund, I think is more appropriate. I think the city, the mayor and council have to have the authority to do the improvements. You know, we've got examples where the improvements weren't done because of a negative vote, resulting in huge maintenance costs and complete reconstruction costs in some cases, like 112th Avenue. So I don't agree with the recommendation. I'll vote against it.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councillor Parslow?
The raising of the Michael subdivision is a good point, because anything you do there would be an improvement. This motion, though, I think, this is where I need clarification, is we're dealing with maintenance. And we have so the way I looked at it is we have existing paved roads that need to be a significant maintenance cost. They need to be resurfaced. That we would continue to take care of maintenance of all our roads, whether they be gravelled or not. The point about micro subdivision is a very good example, right, of maybe a problem with this recommendation, because, as I said earlier, anything you do there would be an improvement, and therefore would require some beneficiaries taking part in the expense. So there's a flaw in the recommendation there, which I hadn't thought of. So I'm wondering if we're really dealing with just paved roads here, and would this recommendation that I put forward as a motion, if it just was relative to existing paved roads, might still have some traction. I do need some help, though, with the infrastructure charges. The infrastructure charges are not a general, if I can use the much used expression, tax grab. They only kick in when a facility or is being redeveloped, or a new facility is being developed. They're not a universally applied fund. So the way I understand number 5 is that would become a universally applied amount, right? Now, so I'm a little confused. I would like staff to clear my eyes a little bit on this.
Okay.
So through your worship, DCC is specific for projects and expansion and how it can be used. The infrastructure charge currently funds all capital within the water or the sewer utility, and I don't know what the infrastructure charge, or if it's an infrastructure charge or a parcel tax or what that looks like. right now the discussion and kind of that policy governance decision that's in front of council is we have an LAS. That LAS says the neighborhood votes on a project, a proposed project, and through that vote or through that process can turn down a project. Really the question today is that how we want to continue to move forward, or is there another option council would like to see where they just pay for improvements, or some other variation through those alternatives. So really that's the discussion, and if council decided we wanted to make a change, we would have to bring that information back, show you what that looks like before proceeding to ensure that's where council would like to go.
Yeah, so I think we have a motion on the floor right now to address, and then depending on, I think, where that falls, we may need to bring it back to review for the LAS policy. And then for this project, and I think the reason it's here is because council gave the direction to move forward with some of those capital projects that we were going to have, and 112th Avenue falls within that. And so staff want to get moving on that. And because is it defined as a normal residential street that LAS applies to, I'm assuming, and that's why it's here?
Correct.
Because you guys want to get that clarified for the purpose of moving forward for the tendering work. So let's deal with the motion then. Councillor Giacco?
I guess what bothers me is the clause in the motion, further that staff be directed to amend the existing LAS policy to only be applicable to projects or portions of projects that include an increased level of service above the existing condition. That's a specific request of administration. So we're not asking administration to come back with something. We're asking them to amend the existing LAS policy for that purpose. So.
And I was just saying, I heard some discussion here about we want to look at the infrastructure charge potentially as a component of the LAS policy, is where it would land. And so I was leaping to the assumption that council wanted to perhaps consider that, and we would need to bring that back with information under that policy. So I guess we have this motion that we need to deal with, and then give direction to staff on that. Further, Councillor Luckstrom and Councillor Parsons.
A quick question through to administration. If the motion was defeated and a motion was put on the table to have you investigate the infrastructure, or whatever we would call it, do you have a time frame that you would look at before you could bring that back? We don't want to stymie projects, but we also don't want to do one right now that all of a sudden could be altered for everybody in the city starting in 3 months.
Yeah. So through your worship, I'll ask Kevin what that timeline looks like if council were to provide direction to look at another option, I guess, that has another funding source. What would that timeline?
Through your worship, timing is of the essence for this, because we're into that season, so make it a priority to get it back. Hopefully, if we get all the information for the next meeting, would be like a 2-week turnaround.
That would be a rush, and I know we have another meeting in between, so 1 month probably is reasonable, but hopefully before that, I think.
Councillor Parsons?
Is it in order for me to make a motion to table this until that meeting?
Sure.
This motion.
Sorry, to
Table the motion?
Until the.
So then we have no direction.
Then there's no direction.
But we,
Okay.
So then
That's my motion, I
cleanest way is then
tabled.
to defeat it.
I'm not tabling the whole issue. We got a motion here, and I think the motion should be looked at, examined under this information that you're going to provide it in 2 weeks' time. Then there could be a separate motion to
When did it?
pursue the.
I want to hear from Cindy.
Cindy?
Through your worship, if you were to table it, you would just set it aside for this meeting and nothing would be given to staff for direction. So you would either want to defeat this
We have another
motion
motion.
or amend it and make whatever motion you want to give staff direction.
In order to give direction, there would have to be a follow-up motion come behind the table
Yes.
in order
Yeah.
to give that direction. Councillor Giacco?
Well, just to keep it clean, I think we should defeat the motion and make a motion for what we actually want.
So we're going to assume the motion's going to be defeated. Councillor
Just,
Lexter.
and I'll look to our administration. I believe that with the consent of the seconder, the mover can withdraw the motion, which then doesn't need a reconsideration if that's where we land in the future. So if the mover and seconder voluntarily withdrew that, we could then move a motion as to what we've been talking about.
What's your pleasure? I'm not seeing a reconsideration, so the motion
Nope.
is on the table.
You were the seconder. Was I the
was?
seconder?
No, you were the second.
Oh, I'm happy to withdraw. Charlie?
Councillor Parslow is not withdrawn. So we're now discussion. Are you ready for the question from the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? It's defeated. Direction, please. Councillor Lexstrom.
I would like to move a motion that we direct administration to pursue an option under the option 5 that they've spoke to in the recommendations, and bring back something to council that could see a general fund established so that it's equitable across the board. I also think within that motion, I would like to include the people that are presently paying for their pavement in front of their homes, to find out if we were to move on something as far as a general account that everybody would pay for, can we find a way that they aren't double charged? And I'm not sure that we have that many that are presently paying under an improvement charge for pavement, but I would like that in the consideration of the motion as well.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Javetkov, discussion? Duncan, clear? Any questions?
No, through your worship, it's clear. We will work hard. If approved, obviously, we would try to get this back as quick as possible so that we can move forward. And I don't know that it'll be an infrastructure charge, but it'll be some form of funding that is across the board or across the community.
And do we, but we have no direction for 112th Avenue yet in terms of allowing that project to continue to proceed?
Correct, that will wait.
Yeah. Okay. Discussion on the motion, Councillor Parslow?
Yeah, well, I can't support it. We've already had a major increase in our, for instance, our water infrastructure charge in our proposed budget of 35%. And now we're thinking of adding another infrastructure charge. I can't support any more.
Thank you. Councillor Lexstrom?
Just speaking, this is not something that people enjoy saying, we want to raise your taxes, we want to give you another infrastructure charge. What I want is some equity in the city of Dawson Creek. Presently, if a group of residents on a street turn down a project, and the city doesn't arbitrarily go to projects unless they're needed, if they turn it down, it increases costs for every other taxpayer in the city, some of whom have already paid for pavement improvements. We need to find an equitable way to go after our roads and fix them. I've lived here all my life, like many people, whether you're here 1 year or 58 years. You can see that our streets are in need of repair, many of them. So we need to find some method that removes the ability to have people say, no, I don't want to pay for that, and see the rest of the taxpayers maintain a maintenance schedule that could, in the long run, be more than what the cost of the original job would be. So, yeah, it's difficult to say we may need to look at more money, but if we're going to put our infrastructure in place and keep our roads in a state of repair and upgrade that needs to be, I think we need to look at some options. I'm not sure what they are, and I'm happy to see what administration brings back. They may have things that we haven't thought of here that we go, wow, that's a great idea. So I'm looking forward to that report.
Thank you. Councillor Javetkov?
I appreciate what you're saying, Charlie. To me, if we implement an infrastructure charge for roads, we have the ability to reduce the tax rate to reflect that, to balance things out. I like the system where you have money that's designated to roads, for example, the same as we do for sewer and water. That money is designated for roads, and it's used for roads. So if we can develop a process similar to the sewer and water accounts, I think it'd be a huge benefit on into the future.
Thank you. Councillor Parslow?
Well, first of all, I appreciate that Councillor Zvetkov appreciates something I've said to her. That's great. That's
Good to see you guys getting along.
Oh, yeah,
Appreciation.
we're great pals. I thought the whole point of dealing with our fiscal gap issues was to enable that we'd have greater capacity to put money for infrastructure. That's the whole concern with how we've been using our fair share money, now the Peace River Accord money. And I thought that's the direction we were taking. Now I'm sure we continue that because we have to do that. But now we're adding some extra charges to what, be a little topping to the amount of money that we're putting in capital. I can't support the motion.
Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead.
One more shot. It's yours. I don't see this as a little topping. I'm not sure if we look at our road needs and the infrastructure costs, and we're going to a budget meeting tonight to talk with the population of our city about cutting $1.3 million out of the operating budget, which in my mind is about 20% of what we have to cut out of that budget from the fair share revenue. We have some difficult choices. I don't think, and we won't do that in 1 or 2 years. That's going to take a number of years to get there, in my mind, if council pursues that. And we take the majority and we go with the wishes of that. But the thought that people can turn down a paving project on a road that is needed to be repaved and turn those costs over to the general population of the city, many of whom have already paid their portion of their road in front, makes very little sense to me. So we're looking at an equitable thing. So we're all, I think, on the same page. The idea of saying we may need more money from you to get these roads done is a result of the process that can allow people to turn it down. It's not, like I say, I think we'll have a healthy discussion tonight when people come out. These aren't great wishes to say we may need more money to run this city and get to where we need our quality of life to be, but the reality is we need more money in the city of Dawson Creek and a reallocation of how some funds are utilized within our budget.
Thank you. Councillor Wilbur, then Councillor Earl.
Great discussion, guys. You know what, I'm actually happy to see what staff comes back with, because not only would some people are paying double because they've already paid to have their street done, but the way we're doing it now also holds at bay those families that are willing to pay to have it done, but they're outvoted by everybody else on their street, so now they're living with a mess too. So I'm happy to support this and see what staff comes back with, and I think it will be some great transparency for the community on this is what it costs to get our roads fixed. Paving's not cheap, never mind what's underneath of it. So I'm looking forward to what staff brings back, and I think it will be a great discussion within the community, and they'll understand better what we're dealing with, I guess.
Thank you. Councillor Earl?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I think this is, part of a larger conversation we're going to have over the next few years around what people really value, what it costs to do that, and how we're sharing that cost. Whether or not we ultimately go along with this, I am interested to see what staff comes back with. But I just, to Councillor Javetkov's point and the rest of council, I think we've all made it at some point or another. With respect to the longer we put this off, the more expensive it gets to deal with. And the notion that one neighborhood can have a line item veto over the city's capital program or planning seems somewhat foolish to me. And as I said, the longer we put this off, we're going to be passing on tens of millions of dollars in unfunded liabilities to the next generation, and that's not appropriate either. So I'm interested to see what staff comes back with. It's not my first preference to raise taxes and fees, but at the end of the day, things need to be paid for, and if people aren't willing to abide by the cuts we need to make, the alternative is that their taxes and fees eventually do go up.
Thank you. Further discussion? Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. How are you doing? Everybody okay still?
I'm feeling sick.
Do you need fresh air, Charlie?
Another 600.
7.2, we have report number 19030 from the city planner regarding the development variance permit for Rorison Land Development 1990 Crescent View subdivision. Councillor Earl?
I move that report number 19-030 from the city planner regarding development variance permit number 19-04 be received. Further, that development variance permit 19-04 be approved to vary the local road standard of subdivision and development servicing bylaw number 4353, 2017 for the northeast quarter of section 21 township 78 range 15 west of the 6th Meridian Peace River District by reducing the minimum width of the pavement from 10 meters to 9 meters, increasing the maximum distance between the property line and the curb from 5 meters to 6 meters, increasing the minimum distance between the water line and the neighboring property line from 2.5 meters to 3.5 meters, and increasing the minimum distance between the storm line and the neighboring property line from 7.5 meters to 10 meters.
Thank you. Seconded. Councillor Javetkov, discussion. Councillor Wilbur?
The one that really stands out to me is reducing this pavement width. I just think of all these narrow streets, garbage trucks trying to pick up garbage cans, snow plows trying to plow snows. How is this going to affect us down the road?
Duncan?
Through your worship, that's Kevin or Aaron.
So through your worship, a lot of our residential streets are 9 meters. Through the subdivision bylaw, we've made changes to increase it to 10 at the time. And that's why they're looking to go back, is because they had originally applied and started construction under the old bylaw, which was 9 meters. So we have 9 meter roads.
Councillor Lexman?
Just following through in a question through to administration, very similar to the one we dealt with recently at a previous council meeting. I think these were established under the old bylaw. A bylaw was changed under the development. They now no longer meet. The concern I raised last time, and I'll raise it again, is the lots that were developed up there were never registered as individual lots. They weren't taxed as individual lots, so the developer saved significant revenue. I would think, I'm prepared to support this recommendation, but moving forward into the future, should anybody roll the dice and say, I'm going to develop a subdivision under this, but not register the lots, if things change in the future in our city, I would think they would be held to account. They're saving money. I mean, I appreciate the development we have, but I also understand that at the end of the day, if we have a bylaw, it would be nice to utilize it. And I'll leave it at that. I'll support the recommendation as it is, but certainly for developers to be put on notice in the future, if you develop something under a certain criteria of a development permit and a bylaw, complete it, register the lots, and pay the dues.
On that topic, is there any way for us, when we are changing the subdivision development bylaw requirements, to put that on notice to, and we don't have that many, right, of developments that were under development that have their development permit to go forward with it, but they don't do that, as we've seen here, where they don't register it because of then each of the lots are taxed individually, but to give the developer, say, listen, this is changing, where it's under consideration for changes that could impact your development. You have 90 days or 120 days with which to register that property. Otherwise, you could be outside the bounds of it, of the new development bylaw, right?
So through your worship, is it through the Local Government Act? There is a time frame? Yes. So go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, through your worship. So under the Local Government Act, after any new bylaws related to the subdivision is implemented, they have 1 year to complete the subdivision works. If they don't complete the subdivision works, they must follow the new bylaw.
Unless a variance is given, and which we're here today. And so that is 100% council's discretion whether you would like to give that variance, but I understand we're telling contractors and developers, look, council's discretion, and council may not approve this, and you're taking that risk if you don't title.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion?
Good try, though, Dale.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. That's our decision.
I understand that administration would inform a developer, though, is what we've just said at this point now, and this discussion, I think, has probably helped deliver that, the intent of council moving forward.
So, and through your worship, I'll just ask quickly, Kevin, Aaron, in those discussions,
So through your worship, anytime that we go through a significant change in subdivision bylaw, we reach out to the development community to have those discussions, not only to let them know that it's coming, but also to garner some feedback through the process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to keep going? You don't have a break? Does anybody need a break?
It looks
5 minutes?
like Councillor was...
So we'll take a 7-minute recess, please.
Recess, okay.
To order, and we were on report number 19031 from the city planner regarding a development variance permit from Home Hardware Stores, 1628 Alaska Avenue. Duncan, do you want to speak to this for council?
Sure. Through your worship, I'll just ask Kevin or Aaron, or Kevin and Aaron, just to talk about how this came about and just some of our discussion with the developer as well, or the owner.
Your worship. So the original request for this variance was to reduce the rear yard setback from 3 meters to 0.15 meters. As part of our normal process, we sent out for referral, and one of the referrals we received back was from CN, as they have their right-of-way immediately behind this property. In their referral, they essentially have said that they do not support this, as it would be getting very close to the right-of-way. It would also make it very difficult or nearly impossible to construct the building and to maintain the building without encroaching on their right-of-way, which is something that they are very much not in favor of. And as well as presenting just some safety hazards. Typically, their preference for setbacks from rail right-of-ways is 15 meters, but in this case, because it was cold storage, it'd be fine going down to 2 meters. So hearing back from those comments, staff agreed that 2 meters would be a reasonable compromise from the 3 meters, but not to the 0.15 meters as requested.
And so, through your worship, this is a variance completely, again, within council's discretion. The bylaw itself is 3 meters, or approximately 10 feet, from the rear setback, and they're requesting about 6 inches.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'd like to move the recommendation. I'd like to move the report number 19-031 from the city planner redevelopment variance permit number 1905. We received further development variance permit 19-05 variance zoning bylaw number 4115 2011 by reducing the minimum exterior side yard setback of the 1628 Alaska Avenue from 3 meters to 2 meters be approved.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Kemp. Discussion. Councillor Javetkov.
So has Home Hardware been approached to see if 2 meters is satisfactory to them?
Duncan?
So through your worship, they have been approached. We've had the discussion with them. They would like 0.15. That is their request, and they've indicated, they will figure out how to construct and how to get done what needs to be done on their property, and we shouldn't be concerned with that. And our comments back have been, the intent of setbacks, whether it be front, rear, side, is to ensure that one activity on one property has a appropriate buffer from another activity on another property. So they don't agree with the 2 meters. They'd like 0.15.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councillor Wilbur?
Through you to staff, isn't there a fence that exists there? Like, are they already have a fence, that property's fenced, isn't it, along the railway? So are they talking about moving their fence a few inches? Like, what are they?
So through your worship, there is a fence?
Through your worship. There is a fence. The fence actually goes onto the CN right-of-way currently. And as part of this project, they also are moving that fence to their property line. So that fence has to be relocated.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Javetkov?
So if Home Hardware is not happy with 2 meters, then why are we doing a variance for 2 meters?
Duncan?
So through your worship, I believe the discussion with Home Hardware was 0.15 is what they would like, and we may, depending on where this moves with council, they may come back and discuss 0.15, but 3 meters didn't work for them. Correct?
They had requested a reduced setback. They didn't have any specific reasoning behind it.
Yeah. So 2 meters would be better than 3 meters, but in their mind, 0.15 is best.
So they're okay with 2 meters then?
Through your worship, I expect that if council approves 2 meters, we will probably hear back from them. They've already indicated that there is a concern with anything other than 0.15. We're trying to be accommodating and find a balance that works for the neighboring property, CN, as well as within our bylaws. So that's why 2 meters is in front of you. Otherwise, it would be 3.
And the issue with CN was aspect of, then I'm assuming, encroachment on their property if anything ever had to be done to it, and or runoff off of the building or the structure, and so that's why they said 6 inches was not reasonable and they wanted 3.
Yes.
Would take 2.
2, yes. So through your worship, as Kevin indicated, in other dealings they've asked for 15 meters. In this case, they feel 2 meters is reasonable, but again, completely within council's discretion. And yeah, it is to ensure that whatever activities are taking place on that property do not impact their property. Correct?
Cindy?
Sorry, it's just been brought to my attention that if council's okay with it, the wording in the recommendation should actually say minimum rear yard setback instead of exterior side. We would make that change if council's fine with that.
Yes. Further discussion, council? Ready for the question? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. 7.4, we have report 19032 from the Deputy Corporate Officer regarding a non-medical cannabis retail store license to Flora Cannabis at number 41116, 128th Street. This is the building down by M&M Meats and the Papa John's Pizza and that.
Correct.
Good. Papa John's? Papa Joe's? I don't know. Anyway, where you go.
Sure, I'll move the...
Councillor Wilbur?
I will move the recommendation on report number 19-032 from the Deputy Corporate Officer regarding non-medical cannabis retail store license, Flora Cannabis, number 411612 8th Street be received. Further, that the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch be advised that council has considered the location of the proposed store, views of the residents, and general impact on the community, and recommends that the license be issued.
Thank you. Seconded. Councillor Parslow, discussion? So this is number 5?
Wow.
Correct.
For non-medical recreation cannabis as a result of the new legislation. Okay. So I'll have a comment after we deal with this motion. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The one thing that we did when we implemented the bylaw and the impacts of the changes that the legislation were bringing to legalize marijuana was we put a $2,500 fee in place for our bylaw enforcement, anticipating that it was going to have some significant or potentially have some impacts on our bylaw enforcement with respect to public consumption and all the other stuff. We've been now 6 months, I think October. So we're closing in on about 6 months. It might be worthwhile for us to review that. I think that bylaw was put in place with that permit fee to anticipate that, but clearly we had no idea. It was like, how long is a piece of string? And so I think it would be appropriate for us to have a report back from administration on that fee and the impacts of it, because we're way up above some other communities in relation to that bylaw and that business license fee. And I think it's worth us having the conversation from council. Duncan?
So through your worship, we do have some direction from council regarding, and it came about from the discussion for the variance across from the liquor store, and direction came out of that report to I think at near September, near end of year, to bring back a report on just the zoning and all of those components and how are they working after they had been implemented 1 year. So this could be would be included in there unless council wants to see it earlier.
All right. It's been a non-issue, I think, for me in terms of what we've seen and the impacts, other than lots of interest from people establishing a business for it, but feedback from community and residents and impacts around any other aspects of public consumption or private people growing their own or whatever has just been absolutely, I haven't had a single comment from anybody. That I always was worried about that business license fee of $2,500, but we only put it in there anticipating that it might have some impact on our bylaw enforcement. And if it hasn't, should we be reviewing that business license fee to ensure we're in the marketplace for those fees? That's my, not the whole full gamut of it. It was just that bylaw enforcement fee and the business license fee of $2,500. So so I throw it out to council. Are you okay if we leave it till September to review it, or would you rather review it now in our budget time to have some feedback from council on it as we're doing business license fees on our budget? Councillor Lexstrom and Councillor Wilbur.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I think the question you've asked, I'm comfortable with it coming back in September. That would allow for the actual operation of some of these stores if once they're approved and open and doing, maybe to give us a little better idea if there's bylaw in front or so on. So I think that the time frame for me with what administration has just said is acceptable.
Good. Okay. Councillor Wilbur.
No, I agree. I think September's fine, and look at it at that year date.
Councillor Earl.
Thank you, Your Worship. The only thing I would add through the staff is, to the best of my knowledge, edibles are also going to be legal come October. Is that not the case? Are we have any discussions planned about how we're going to be treating that? Because that's a very different beast than just smoking pot.
Duncan?
So through your worship, I don't know that there's been a lot of discussion around edibles. I know when they implemented the first phase, I guess, of legalizing non-medical, they talked about within 12 months edibles would be, that they would find some regulation around it. Have we had any update on the edibles? Peter, have you heard anything yet? So outside of that, my understanding is, the
direction from the province.
Pardon me?
We don't have any direction.
Not that I'm aware of, but I also understand that when the edibles do come forward, they will just be part of the existing non-medical business, and I don't know as far as regulation what we would...
Well, I'm just thinking with respect to the initial... and it won't affect bylaw so much as potentially first responders. But dosage-wise, this is an entirely new element, and while most people who consume alcohol can distinguish between 40 proof and beer and wine, as far as alcohol concentration goes, THC concentration is an entirely new beast to most people who've been consuming black market product for however long they've been doing it. So, and especially with edibles, you really don't want to mess up the dosage on that stuff, or so I've heard.
Well, that's the federal government, why they're looking to put this quality control standards in place as they allow for the distribution, who's supplying them, where they're being produced, where they're being provided, and then how they're getting into the marketplace. So I think that's why the feds have relied on and saying we're going to there's going to be a year before we're going to allow the edibles into the marketplace because of the whole quality control component to it.
Okay.
Anyway, so that was just, we're good to leave it till September. I'm good with that. It was just a piece for me. Next item we have is 7.5, report 19034 from the Deputy Corporate Officer regarding the feasibility of selling the vacant lots at Hillcrest Park. Duncan, do you want to speak to this, or do we want to just, have council got enough information to?
So through your worship, we do have a first motion there to receive for discussion, if you like.
Okay. Councillor Earl, seconded. So motion for discussion. Moved Councillor Earl, seconded. Councillor Kemp, all in favor? Opposed? Carried? Okay. Yeah, when you make the motion, you get to approve it, and then we get to speak to it. So go ahead.
No, I was just going to read the recommendation off, which allowed it for discussion. So, no, I agree with the recommendation. I think given some of the development permits we're seeing come across our desk, the demand for these lots isn't there at the moment. Not only that, if we're going to get into the business of rescinding park dedications, I think that's a much bigger conversation. So not only that, but the engineering work required to find out whether these are actually viable or not seems like a lot of work for a demand that might not currently exist.
So you're moving the recommendations 1 and 2?
Yes.
Thank you. Seconded? Councillor Wilbur, discussion? Councillor Chiveka?
I was going to discuss the other part there, but that's no problem. I just note that we've spent $2,000 in kind so far with staff to come up with to this point here. So that's not a big investment. And the estimated total additional costs to prepare the lots for sale is $48,000. And the assessed value of the lots is $1 million. So there's, to me, it seems like there's quite a benefit to the city, especially in these times when we're trying to find cuts. Adding $1 million to our assessment would help to reduce the amount of cost reductions that we have to do. So I can appreciate the fact that we're into some serious workload right now with staff, and it's probably not a good time to proceed with this, but I certainly think that it should be on our radar for the future. You know, the lots, I mean, $1 million in assessed value just for the property, and when you put houses on them, you can probably add on another $6 to $8, $10 million in assessed value. So I think there's quite a benefit, and I agree that we've got some discussion to do with parks, but it has been mentioned that we've got substantial parkland around the city. A lot of it is we've reduced the maintenance on it, and it is a discussion that we have to have, especially in these times of financial issues.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councillor Wilbur?
The thing that stood out to me was the slope and stability that came out of it. So when I just look at that particular piece of property, we don't have that stability at the lower end. So to me, $1 million, yes, but at the same time, we need to retain some green space within our neighborhoods. But also, is it worth going ahead and now having engineering and all of that done when we already know that that hill is sloughing? So for me, I'm happy to have it stay as park and not go down that road of unknown expenses to stabilize that property to develop it.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councillor Chiveka?
I didn't read that instability the way you described it there. Apparently there is some instability at the bottom of the lot or at bottom of the property, which is down at the road.
Through your worship, correct? There's some cracking and some sloughing at the bottom down by the road.
Which is normal on a side cut, an exposed side cut. We recognize that. The instability at these lots, there is no evidence of instability there. And in fact, the comment about getting geotechnical work done is to identify that. So you can't assume that the hillside is unstable because you've got sloughing on an exposed side cut at the road.
Councillor Parslow, then Councillor Wilbur.
Well, I concur with Councillor Jabetkov that maybe this is not for this year because of all the other things that staff are dealing with, but I was going to suggest that we set aside funding in next year's budget to explore these matters that need to be explored, because they're nice location, would be a nice location. We do need to try to increase our tax base, and so while I accept we don't move forward this year, I don't think we should consider it next year for the budget implications of stability and dealing with the alternate resolutions.
Councillor Wilbur?
I'm just going to rebuff Councillor Jabetkov with some cheekiness.
Be nice to
No,
I'm
you're gonna
being
have
nice, but those are conversations that people heard in the Lower Mainland too, and their houses all fell off the side of that slope because it was sloughing at the bottom. So if the ground's moving, it's moving, and what's at the top will come to the bottom. So I'm being cheeky, but it's been said before, and it didn't prove to be profitable.
Thank you. We have a motion that we're going to defer and not move forward with it this year, so that's the direction.
Is it a deferral motion?
No, we're going to remain as park. We're not doing anything with it. Sorry. Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Bylaws? Anything?
Nothing.
Mayor's business. I'll let's do very quickly. Was that meeting with continuing on with our engagement with First Nations? So I presented to Halfway and Blueberry, both around the the health, education, economic opportunities, and building that partnership. Both are very interested as a follow-up to the meeting we had last fall with them, and being involved in and with us in regards to some of these initiatives, and been very well received, and looking at expanding that with them and different initiatives and different options that exist with us and partnering with our First Nations. The budget meeting with the PRRD was held and is ongoing, and there have been very little in terms of anything significant other than solid waste is the biggie for Peace River Regional District, and that's 25 or 30% of the Peace River Regional District budget that we all are part of as it relates to solid waste management, and there's a ton of work going on there. One of the big issues at the RD as it relates to solid waste is the whole aspect of recycling, diversion, landfills, and the implications of that. And so I know that the board and the solid waste committee are really digging into that in a big way, and we looked at biodegradables at the Besborough site. They were looking at putting a facility in there, but again, costs and stuff. So anyway, the RD are doing a bunch of work at that level or in regards to solid waste management plan that through legislation we're all part of. I presented to a joint meeting of Rotary and Chamber of Commerce last week on the budget, and appreciate Councillor Earl attending, and just I've been to the Rotary Sunrise Club, I've been to the Rotary Noon Club and Chamber, talking about the proposed budget that the council are in right now in terms of our conversations, deliberations, and talking about budget and giving some information and overview, and allowing people to have questions about it. So it's, I think, part of our responsibility to be out there and talking about it, as we're going to do tonight, and have a public hearing and seek that feedback from people in terms of our budget and what budget deliberations and what council are up to. So anyway, it was good. It was good turnout. There was probably, say, 20, 25 people at the meeting, and really got some good engagement, good questions, and appreciated the opportunity to be invited and to be able to speak to them. Attended the Air Cadet ceremony the other night, and so there's this Air Cadet Squadron 353 that have been in operation for I don't know how long, and what a great group. And Kim Shipton is the ma'am who runs it, does an amazing job with the kids and the organization. They've organized the trip this year. They're leaving in a week or two to, I think, Boeing in Seattle, taking all the kids down, and did some fundraising. And so I got asked to go to a ceremony last week, and the local Legion Club and the kids, the squadron, are the ones that are out there selling the poppies every year for Remembrance Day. And so the Legion, through the sales of the poppy, got their approval to give the kids $4,900 from the poppy sales through the local branch of the Legion, and help the kids on this trip. And so I was really happy to be asked to attend that. Equal Frank Ross had their science fair last week on Wednesday, I think it was, and gee, it's fun. I remember the days of the stress of being in the science fairs. So it was kind of fun to go and watch. But it was amazing to see how engaged the kids are in their science fair, and parents and teachers and local folks were in there judging, and it was just a really good event, and I'm happy to go. Solid Waste Committee, I mentioned about that in terms of PRRD and what's going on there. Jail and bail last Saturday was for the First Dawson Creek Scouts fundraiser. And again, really good group of organization in our community of volunteers helping raise a great group of kids. And they had jail and bail. They're looking to send the boys and girls to camp. And so the mayor was arrested and got sent to jail to raise some money. And so I was really happy to be able to be a part of that on Saturday. Saturday night, the South Peace Hospice Palliative Care Society had their St. Patrick's Day dinner at Seniors Hall, and it's a big fundraiser for those guys, and sold out. It was so good to see them have a full house at the Legion, and people volunteering to put the meal on, and they had a big silent auction, and just some dancing and some music, and they did a great job. Dawson Creek Judo were here as a delegation, Sean, and so they had a request for swim passes. Duncan, can you tell the talk about the implications of that?
Sure. So just history. Last year they requested $1,000 for the tournament, and council provided 750. They've requested this year 100 passes. Ross, what's the cost of those?
Thank you, through your worship. The cost of those passes is $5 per. That's ages 6 through 18 for a youth pass. So approximately $500 is what we're looking at for that particular request.
Okay. What's your pleasure? Councillor Lexstrom, Councillor Parslow?
I would move that through our fund, dedicated fund, that we honor their request for 100 youth passes for this round.
Seconded. Councillor Parslow, discussion. Councillor Earl?
And not so much specific to this event, but for similar events and requests moving forward, your worship. I know when somebody goes to Edmonton, for instance, and stays in a hotel there, many hotels offer, as part of the booking package or as part of an enticement to get people to stay there, free passes to West Ed around that. So moving forward, this might be something we want to, if hoteliers are going to be some of the primary beneficiaries of these events coming to town, we might want to go back to them and encourage them to provide swim passes as part of their, advertising, marketing, promotional. It's just something to think of moving forward, as we are in the midst of reducing the amount we're able to support these kind of initiatives on one-off basis. And for $5 a head, if you're offering a continental breakfast, same difference.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion? Councillor Wilbur?
I wasn't actually sure if this would be supported or not, so I checked into some of the finances that Love Dawson Creek has. And so actually, if it's a friendly amendment, Love Dawson Creek would like to partner on those passes, and we would provide $250. So if we split it in half, that leaves $250 maybe for some other group to come forward. So I'd be happy to provide half for those passes.
That's what I'd said in the motion.
Is that what you said? Okay, perfect.
Certainly acceptable to me.
You okay with the seconder?
Well, I thought 350 might come.
Don't push it, Parslow.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. That's great. I want to deal with the airport runway extension funding. I'm going to bring that forward, and I got to bring it up.
I think we've got one more in mayor's business. Your
Yeah, I know. I want to do that.
Yeah,
I want to do them last. I want to get these other 2 or 3 done, and then I'll get those last 3 because they are on the agenda. So the airport runway extension come up at our last. So 2 or 3 things that I, when I'm reflecting on the airport runway extension project, and first, the prioritization for us in our fiscal future is the #1 strategic priority council have landed on is fiscal financial. And to me, if we move forward with the airport runway project extension and that grant, we're locked into that project, and we're locked into the operation of the airport for the long-term future. And I think, to me, until we've agreed and completed that review of the long-term plan for fiscal financial, I think it's premature for us to go into the airport runway extension project until we've completed that work in 2019 as it relates to that fiscal future. And I worry about that, because if we have to make significant financial decisions for the future, the airport, by us having that runway project, locks us into operating the airport for the long term. I'm not opposed to the project. I'm opposed right now in reflection about the timing of the project. The second piece to it is the financial implications of the additional components of the project, and that $600,000 or $700,000 that's adding into it, put into our 2020 capital budget, add to that of either finding that additional revenue for 2020 or removing things that we've already got into our 5-year capital plan that now are going to either get bumped or we're going to have to find the additional revenue for it. And so for me, I'm honestly of the view today that the airport project I'm supportive of. But I think two things. We need to get our long-term financial view in place first, and we're going to do that starting again very quickly for 2020 and beyond. And understanding the fiscal components of that capital and that capital project, I think we need to really lock down so we understand the components to that of our 2020 or 2021 capital budget. So from that perspective, I'm bringing forward a motion that we reconsider that motion that we approved at the last meeting. So the requesting council reconsider the matter of the city's application for the BC Air Access funding for the airport runway extension project pursuant to 131 of the community charter, and vote again on the motion that we had on the floor. Cindy, can you explain it?
Yes, council would bring this forward just as it was originally. What I've done is compiled a consolidated motion because the original was amended. So, and council has approved those minutes, so I'm assuming they're fine with that change. So I have compiled this consolidated motion, and council would bring it back forward as if it was originally placed on the table, and they would vote.
So it's the motion is, as we passed at the last meeting, is now back on the floor for consideration and discussion, and it's been therefore on the floor now for discussion. Councillor Wilbur.
So, and if we were to push this back, this won't affect any other grant applications that we're applying for the airport. I believe there was some other. And secondly, I would feel much more comfortable having that final design report, because we never know that there could maybe be some other things that come out that adjust that cost.
So the work and engineering work, the project still moves forward. There's still work that's undergoing. It's just delaying that we apply for the grant.
Yeah.
And we withdraw that application for that grant now.
I understand that, and I'm just saying that I'd be comfortable having that whole report and then having that discussion, because I'm thinking that maybe some other things might come out of that report that add to the cost. But I also don't want, I just want to clarify through staff that this won't stop us from getting any other grants that we apply for stuff at the airport.
Duncan?
So through your worship, just for the gallery, and so the motion is back on the table to be voted on, and the motion is that we submit a grant in $1.8 million. The exact same motion from the previous meeting. Council is going to vote on it. If the motion is approved, then we would submit that grant with the caveats of financial costs, burden, etc. If the motion is defeated, then we'll withdraw that application from the Air Access Program. However, all other direction from council, which was get the engineering done, have that report finalized for council, that will continue.
Okay.
The other grant that you refer to is a different, it may be the same program, but it's a different grant. They're not tied.
That's all I wanted, to make sure they're not tied. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lexstrom?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I will speak in support of the reconsideration at this moment. We actually went down this road and had a healthy discussion at the last meeting when we looked at this. And I think it's upon reflection. The issue is not whether we want a good airport, whether we want to try and improve it. There was unknowns in the many millions of dollars, not even tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, but many millions of dollars with regard to the existing runway, not the extension. So the thought of applying for a grant and being successful, and us only having to put in $1.823 million in roughly an $8 million program, that's a healthy thing for the city, unless an additional $7 million in expenditures is required on the existing runway, of which we don't have a grant for at this time. So I look at the motion as one of not saying that we don't want the airport, but we need more information. And if we continue with this application and we're successful, we are tying our hands to money that we haven't yet approved, to be honest, in the future with the existing runway. So once we get our formal plan for the airport in place that says we're going to try and develop it, we're going to try and continue it, or we're not, I think this might be premature. And getting a grant and then turning it back, I'm not sure that happens all that often, so.
Not a good idea.
I prefaced it all by saying I'm absolutely still in favor of the project. I'm still in favor. My worry is right now the timing of it and not understanding some of the components around it that worry me, and how we get locked into it then by having that grant applied and accepted. And so I think we still want to continue with the work and the engineering and the business case and all of that stuff for council's consideration when we have those locked in, but also our future financial positions. Councillor Javetkov.
I presented my thoughts, I guess, last meeting there on this issue, and I still feel that the airport is critical to our economic development. Now, I've heard two comments here today that we're sort of undecided whether we want to continue with the airport or not. That worries me. I mean, we need to have some advantage here for businesses to move here. And our transportation infrastructure is critical. I think it's been said by industry more than once that the airport is important. I guess deferring this grant application, what worries me is that this grant may not be available in the future. I don't know. So I'm in favor of continuing with the application. I know there's some unknowns. I don't think they're in the multi-millions of dollars. I think it was expressed that last time there's some, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars unknowns. But we did have a caveat that if we couldn't afford the costs with the finalized report from the consultant, that we would then pull the application. There was a caveat already to that effect, so I'm in favor of continuing with it. Like I say, I think the airport is critical to economic development. We don't have many things here to attract business other than the resources, but as a community, as a city, we need to maintain and improve everything that we have that will attract businesses to this community.
Thank you. For clarification, I absolutely believe the airport's an important piece of our infrastructure. It's the timing of how we build this project for me, and understanding the costs of it, that I'm really, that's what's caused my reflection on bringing it back. Councillor Lexter and then Councillor Parsel.
Just a question following up on Councillor Javatkov's comments. As I understood it, it was in the millions of dollars for the existing runway with drainage issues and lighting issues. Did I misinterpret something was said at the last meeting?
So, through your worship, the subsurface drainage project, I believe, is 7.2 million, and that's through the same grant program.
Different grant.
Okay, so that's money we haven't allocated yet that would need or possibly need. Okay, that's the clarification I was after. The issue we're going to have to ask ourselves moving forward, and I know, Your Worship, you've been in discussions. I'm not sure whether we have any commercial activity out there as far as new carriers looking at locating here or possibly coming. We've got some tough choices ahead of us, and I too support the airport, but at some point you have to say, how many millions of dollars can we invest in this airport, and is it a commercial airport that we're after? We're in a unique situation. We have Grand Prairie on one side of us, Fort St. John on the other. Or is it an existing airport that can allow for our industrial customers, our major people that have offices here, to bring in their staff, to bring those? There's a number of things that I think we haven't answered ourselves yet as a council. So I'm not a believer in build it and they will come. So at this point, I'm not saying get rid of the airport. I'm saying I think our timing might be off on this, because if there are millions of dollars of additional costs that we may have to incur, that will definitely have an implication on my decision and my vote on moving forward with the airport.
Councillor Parslow, then Councillor Javetkov.
Okay. Well, I'm certainly not in favour of continuing with this application. Never have been. This report, I don't think our new members of council have maybe read this report. Have you seen this? Have you seen this? Have you seen this? No. I now understand this report a little better thanks to time. This was issued February 14th, 2019. And last council meeting, and you know, we were told that now as you're redoing this runway, you have to come up to the current TP 312 5th edition standards. But in this report, February 2019, we're told that we'll have to do that. So I must confess that that had missed me. It was included in this report. It says that the new clearway slope changes and its associated with takeoff surface in TP 312 5th edition must be implemented accordingly. Further review of the existing clearway defined under TP 13 4th edition must be reassessed as part of the runway 624 extension project and will be completed once the obstacle survey outlined in section 255 is completed. It is recommended that CYDQ complete a gap analysis prior to the extension of runway 624th extension work, as this will trigger implementation of the new standards on existing 624. So I'd underlined all that, but that was forgotten. So we were given good warning that there's implications, right, existing structure. And I had written at the bottom of this, Mayor, that in handwriting, establish a society. I would call it the South-East Regional Airport Society. I also wrote, develop an economic impact study of this airport. And I also wrote at the bottom, this should not be done on the backs of city taxpayers alone. I still believe that. The airport is critical. I agree with what the Mayor and you have said, but to what type of airport, what degree, etc. It also says here, there's a section toward existing runway 624 physical characteristic comparison with TP 312 5th edition standards. And again, I had underlined. Note that the runway extension portion's design criteria was set to meet up to AGN 4 categories, but there is no separate study completed on existing runway 624 as outlined in section 3.3 if the existing facility meets the standard. It should be noted that there are a number of differences in runway physical characteristics requirements, etc., etc. I'm having a bit of a deja vu over this airport project. I'm thinking back to the multiplex and how that started as a certain defined project. And then as we got into it, it was found to be the original consultation involved in that was questioned, and another consultation was done, and then we had an ice plant, and then so a 20-odd million project became a $60 million project. The Attorney General for local government reviewed the construction of the two things at the same time, but what I'm referring to here is the cultural center. And these recommendations were all agreed to by staff and the council. The City of Dawson Creek, I'm reading from this document, the City of Dawson Creek should require the preparation of a business case prior to council approval of all significant projects. The City of Dawson Creek should ensure that key risks, and I've heard risks identified about this project, that all key risks associated with contemplated major capital projects are identified, assessed, and mitigated prior to approving each project. This includes developing risk management plans for such project. Review should also include assessment of project management risk costs and future financial sustainability. I believe those things should be applied to this airport. This is a major capital investment. So because of all the concerns raised by other council members, I will not be voting to support the application, but to defer it.
Thank you. Councillor Javetkov.
So could I get some clarification on that 7.2 million? Is that 7.2 million going to appear in our budget discussions to include in our budget in the future?
Duncan?
So through your worship, I believe the 7.2 million subsurface you're referring to, is it a grant? Is it 100% grant? It's so if we receive it, it would be 100% grant. So we would show an in and out within the budget as far as an in revenue and an out expenditure. And we're eligible for those grants provided we have passenger service.
Correct.
So while ever we have passenger service at the airport, we are eligible through the BCAP and ACAP program.
So it's not, we won't see a $7.2 million entry into our budget for that project.
Go ahead, Duncan.
Through your worship, if approved, then it will be included in our budget. However, it will not be the city funding it. It will be funded through the grant.
Councillor Earl.
So just for further clarification with respect to that the big red flag for me is the phrase "if approved," because if we're approved for the runway extension grant and we're not approved for the other grant, we're still committed to spending that $7.2 million either way to bring the runway up to code with the latest compliance requirements, correct?
Duncan?
So through your worship, the subsurface is something we've identified with the existing runway, and that's why we applied for the grant. The only commitment we would have would be replacing the lights. So as part of the subsurface project, the lighting on the side of the runway needs to be ripped out because that's where we'll be doing the majority of the work. As part of the extension, that lighting needs to be replaced. So there is a cost for that lighting that we don't have a price for that cost, and we've asked, and I've asked Patrick as we bring forward more information with the report to close up some of those gaps. To bring the conversation back, there are risks identified in the report that I don't have numbers for, and I can't have numbers for you today, unfortunately.
In light of the unknowns, I think deferring for a year would be appropriate, given it'll give us time to continue to build that business case and get a better view of what the total cost of this is going to be. Not only that, but to your point, your worship, it'll provide us with the time to figure out our long-term strategy and exactly how our local airport's going to fit into that. I do agree with you and Councillor Javetkov and Lekstrom that our airport is a vital piece. You know, not having a functioning airport would be like not having rail service, or how, you know, in this day and age, it's a vital piece of infrastructure. But I'm not willing to leap without knowing what's lies ahead, and this kind of solves both those problems, and it gives us time to build the business case as well as figure out our long-term strategy. So I'll support your motion.
Thank you. Councillor Parslow, and then we'll...
One other unknown is the whole issue that the mayor shared with us at the last meeting. You received a letter, and it's all the topic of land sterilization and compensation. I know the figures that were talked about a little while ago, and there is a considerable impact, and that's another risk, and we need to talk about ways of mitigating it, but it's an unknown risk.
Thank you. Ready for the question? So the question now on the motion is that we submit and support the project as it's written, as we voted on at the last council meeting, which carried. So are you ready for the question? All those in favor? Opposed? It's defeated. And so the city will withdraw the application then to the BC Air Access Program. And we will continue with the work on the final design report and present that report to council once it's completed. Duncan?
Correct.
And you need a motion for that, or no?
No,
That
that's the
motion
previous
exists
direction.
on there.
Yep.
Thank you. 9.3, I have a reconsideration also of the laneway snow removal, because we've had some follow-up discussions and there's community groups involved in it, so I don't think it's necessary for us to have staff do a bunch of work on that when we're going to deal and try to engage in some community work. So I'd like council's approval for a motion to reconsider that direction.
So move.
Councillor Parslow, seconded Councillor Earl. Discussion? And we had a really great, Councillor Parslow had a meeting with South Peace Society for Community Living and the Rotary Club and different organizations, and so I think there's opportunities there for us within our community groups to try to find a way and some options and alternatives, and we'd like to pursue that, so there's no need for the motion for staff to go through a bunch of work. Duncan?
So just to help Cindy out, so what you've proposed would defeat the previous motion and introduce a new motion where you're working with these community groups?
That's correct.
Okay.
So let me pull it up. I'm having trouble here. Oh, can you read it, please, Cindy? I'm struggling.
I have it in front of me if you want.
Want me to read it?
Yeah.
Okay. That council reconsider the motion that staff develop guidelines to assist members of the public, such as seniors, low income, or physically challenged, who require access to their alleyway, that would allow council to consider special circumstances for the city to look after snow removal. And the recommended motion is, the proposed motion is that Mayor Bumstead be authorized to meet with community groups that may be interested in providing snow removal service for seniors and people with mobility limitations in the community.
So we want to defeat that first motion?
Correct.
So the motion's back on the floor for council. All those in favor? Opposed? It's defeated. And the motion now that I be authorized to meet with community groups to provide snow removal service for seniors and people with mobility limitations within the community. Councillor Wilbur, seconded. Councillor Parslow. Discussion. Councillor Wilbur.
I just want to add to you had mentioned some groups, but also Better at Home. So
Well, and so Better
yeah,
at Homes are
yeah.
one that are in there as well, Shapley.
So yeah, I did check with Linda and actually one of the volunteers. So they do have 2 people with
Yeah.
snow blower shovels that have been doing that. So they would be a good.
That's that whole community
Yeah.
groups, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Finally, I have I mentioned that the last, I'd asked for this information to be brought forward on the property tax information for industrial, and it's really the industrial rates, and it shows that burden of property taxation, commercial business to residents, and almost 50-50, and how industrial tax rate, the heavy industry is in particular, shows the graph of what, where we took it from 10 years ago, and then brought it down to the same rate as what commercial or business would pay. And then last year, council looked at it and readdressed it and increased it from $17, $16 up to $22. But when you look at comparative communities, we're still in a range where we're at the lower end of Port St. John at $27, Tumbler Ridge at $82, Taylor at $44, and those communities, Prince George at $47. Those communities with heavy industry in their communities can really rely on heavy industry for that share of the industrial assessment. So I wanted to basically, for council's information, for us to look at it as information. I don't think we need to make a decision on it, but as we move forward, and we're going to have some further discussion in our upcoming budget meetings, is there a will for council to have this as a consideration for additional revenue? Councillor Parslow?
Well, I think the report, which is very thorough, would say that we definitely need to put it into the mix for our upcoming, not the 2019 budget, but the budget deliberations that will begin this fall. I think we have in fairness to our taxpaying public, duty to make sure that we're not out of whack with the growing trends, and we certainly have a very low rate. In my headspace, every $1,000 is important for us working towards a more stable budget situation.
I think and certainly I think through our budget discussions, it's always commercial and business, and we take an overall flat 2.5% increase and everybody gets impacted by it. But I think to me last year when we looked at it, and I grant that there isn't a ton of assessment in heavy major industry, we only have 4 properties in the city that are heavy industry properties, So we don't have a ton of assessment. We don't. So even a major change, as we did last year, only impacted the revenues by $100,000 or $120,000. Like, it wasn't significant. It's not like you're shifting the burden off residents, but it's always that burden of taxation and who's paying, and should they be. And so that's why I just felt it was a really good report that we had last year and part of this year, and I wanted to bring it forward for council just to have for information, and perhaps we included in some discussions in on March 20th as we get into, or do you want some direction? Would you prefer some direction now on it? Duncan?
So through your worship, the only direction we would require would be if it was something you wanted to consider as part of 2019, just with the budget meeting this evening. If it was something council was looking at in respect to the process, you'd want to let the public know we were still considering it in 2019. But if it's 2020, we have lots of time.
Yeah. Okay. I think we should look at it this year again for 2020, and as we concern, but I'm happy to have council, if you want to have some direction, that we bring it back for this year. It's not going to be, it's not a major piece of revenue that you're going to say, well, you're going to bring in another $1 million. You're talking maybe 50 or 100 grand, maybe 50 grand, maybe at the most, if you went it up even to $3 or $4 a thousand. Councillor Jabecka?
Yeah, I think we should discuss it in terms of this year.
Okay. All right. So let's, we'll make a motion, then we bring it back for direction to have some indication on the heavy industry tax rate for 2019 with a recommendation.
So
that's a motion that we made?
Yeah.
I second that.
Moved Councillor Jabecka, seconded Councillor Parslow.
Do we,
Sorry. So Councillor Lexstrom, then Councillor Wilbur.
So what we would be doing is the possibility of changing the tax rate for this year's budget, which will have, should it go through, a positive impact regardless of what that rate is if it goes up. I do note you try and attract industry, you try and be competitive in the market. We are well below most on this. We have shifted, and with the financial situation we find ourselves in, where increases are being seen by, I'll use the residential tax base or commercial, excuse me, I don't think this is an unfair hit for major industry. I think we want to make sure we communicate with them that this is something that we're entertaining a discussion on, and something I would support.
Yeah. Like I say, it's. I think last year was a real good discussion we had on it, and we took that, moved that tax rate, mill rate for heavy industry away from the same as a business or commercial, which I thought it should have been. And we're still $4 or $5 a thousand under our next closest community. That so that I think it's worthy of discussion. And if you say there's another $30,000 or $40,000 potentially in revenue for us there in the community, then we should be talking about that. Councillor Wilbur?
I don't disagree. My question, I guess, is then does staff have to get this together for discussions for this evening with the public, or is it something that we can look at afterwards?
Yeah, we'll look at it after.
Okay.
It's not, it's such a small, honestly, it's such a small implication.
I realize that. I just don't want all of a sudden change the direction.
I think
and-
we could speak to it.
Oh, we'll speak to it, sure.
Okay.
Duncan?
So through your worship, we have a special budget meeting March 20th.
Yeah.
And we would bring back some scenarios showing different amounts levied through different percentage
Perfect.
increase.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Good, thank you. Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And then the last two from our delegations today, we had Ryan McIver in from Dawson Creek Tourism in regards to NCLGA and the Minerals North as potential conferences to apply for. Duncan?
So through your worship, there's kind of three requests within that letter. The first is the council support both of those bids. The second is that council commit to some form of participation, whether it be a couple of councillor representatives, and I know it's off in the future. And the third request was that the city underwrite any loss within that. And so I can, on the third piece there, I can work with the Event Center and Spectra and just indicate that this is part of the ongoing operational subsidy that they're approved, and that they would need to work that in if there was anticipated loss.
Councillor Wilbur, can you speak to the NCLGA when we did it last time? It was fairly successful revenue-wise.
It was very successful revenue-wise. In fact, it was one of the most successful AGMs that NCLGA has had. So it was very well run, and that was why I had asked about bringing in those other communities for tours, because we had people stay. So it was very successful. I don't even anticipate a loss of any kind with NCLGA. People know what they're paying, they know what they're coming to do, and I mean, it's their AGM, right? So I would support it. I don't know much about Minerals North, but I think there's a huge benefit to that too.
Councillor Parslow, then Councillor Earl.
Yes, I had no problem supporting the first two components, but I think I do not believe we should function like a bank to these organizations. I would expect them to develop a very sound budget, and I cannot support us underwriting any losses. If they're going to use the Encounter Event Center, that, as you just said, that's part of what we do. We do have some access to the place for community events. Do we not, or would we be paying the full meal deal for this stuff?
Duncan?
So within our agreement, the city has use of the facility. However, we're still responsible for out-of-pocket costs. So if there were security requirements or we wish to have some other form of entertainment or component, we would be responsible for that and have been in the past.
Councillor, sorry, I got Councillor Earl, then Councillor Wilbur.
So yeah, I'm knowing historically how these kind of events go, with either whether you're talking about the Rotary Conference we did, the Métis Nations of British Columbia. Historically, they're not. I mean, there's a significant food and beverage component for the event center, which tends to result in it being financially successful for them. So I understand Ryan puts that in there. Realistically, it would be highly unlikely that the city would have to backstop any loss. What I'd also point out is we as councillors are part of our annual travel budget is allocated for travel to NCLGA. So if we're able to attend that here locally, that saves us some money on that end as well.
Thank you. Councillor Wilbur?
Just on to what Councillor Parslow's asked for, NCLGA, their budget is formed around what the costs are going to be, and that they're going to make a profit, because that is the money they have to run, besides overtop membership fees, for all of their members. So they're not in it to have expenses where they're going to lose money. They have to come up with a very tight budget, and they stick to it. So they know well ahead of the game, and then they adjust what you are going to pay to attend that conference. So the money loss, I don't think, is an issue for NCLGA, and I would imagine Minerals North runs on the same type of format, that they're going to have a budget, they know what the food's going to cost, they know whatever, and they're going to come up with a price on what it costs to attend. So those protections are put in there, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Thank you. Councillor Giavecchio?
So the last NCLGA that was here, there was a considerable in-kind support from the city. Those admin costs, were they included in the overall cost of the event?
So last time we hosted, we actually hired, I believe, Lindsay from Platinum Planning Events, and so she took care of our sponsors, she took care of most of that. What we did have was a committee of all of the South Peace region, so some councillors sat on it, and we did have some staff time, but we utilized that free event that the city has, so that was the component. Then the other communities, so Tumbler Ridge, Chatwin, Puscoopi, all put something into it as their share to hosting. But if tourism's doing it, that changes the dynamics a little bit, and they're gonna have to work with NCLGA to say this is what it's gonna cost, and NCLGA will now know on the other end what their profit's gonna be.
So just one other question, considering that it's tourism that will be organizing it, is that going to have an impact on our decisions regarding our contribution to Tourism Dawson Creek? Like, we're giving them $500 and some thousand a year. So if we decide that we want to reduce that amount, is this going to come back on us and say, well, you can't reduce it now because, you know, you've approved NCLGA and you've approved the Minerals Conference and all those applications. I wouldn't want to get us into that situation. We've got substantial cuts to make, and tourism is one of the things that we'll be looking at.
Okay. Councillor Parslow?
Yes, it's an important point, but I think with that particular area, that there will, whatever we do, there's going to be a phase in, because obviously we have a number of ongoing commitments that would need to be phased in. But it's an important consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Lexton?
Just a quick question through to administration. The motion before us is one that we would pursue and support, hosting Minerals North and the NCLGA, as I understood it. Duncan, correct me if I'm wrong. I heard that you say you would inform
Is NCGA going to be involved?
Ryan that they would be responsible for any cost overruns. Is that what you say? You would, that would be built into the fund we give them already?
So, through your worship, if that's council's will, I don't know that council would like to underwrite if there were a potential loss, I don't know that council would want to underwrite and provide more funding within the budget. I think council would probably want to direct tourism or the event center or that partnership to say you need to ensure this is included in the funding you're already receiving.
Okay. And I would concur with what was said earlier. If there was a loss on the NCLGA, it wouldn't be, probably the bigger impact would be the loss of the organization, because that's how they fund the organization.
So they pay for it, yeah.
I think it's worthy to pursue this. I think that the tourism discussion is a discussion we have to have as we move forward. As I understand it, we have a signed contract under our tourism contract right now, so I'm not a big believer in jumping in and breaking contracts, but if we look to the future, what do we do? That's a whole other discussion.
Okay. So, motion? Please?
Motion.
I think we had one to support
Oh, yeah,
the
we had a motion
application.
going.
No.
No.
No?
We don't?
No.
Okay, I motion to support Spectra Venue Management's
It's Tourism Dawson
Tourism
Creek.
Dawson Creek, managed by Spectra, to pursue the Minerals North and NCLGA as per their letter.
Thank you. Seconded? Councillor Wilbur? We've had some discussion. Councillor Lexton?
Just through to the mover and seconder. So the underwriting of it, then you're supporting that, or are we going to have a direction to our staff that says we would recommend that they would find that within the existing?
Okay, yeah, sorry.
Yes.
I can, yeah. With the caveat that they, any losses be absorbed into their existing budget subsidy received by the city of Dawson Creek as part of their annual operating revenue.
Should they be?
Okay. Thank you. Second, Councillor Javeka?
So what does that mean? That the $1.5 million that are in that account, that's where the losses will come from? 'Cause that is city money.
Yeah.
Or from the 500,000
So-
for tourism.
We're okay just to subsidize the cost of these events?
So it would be tourism,
taxpayers' money.
not the event center, the
Be
tourism.
tourism.
Duncan?
So through your worship, just for clarification, and I'll just speak in regards to the event center, it's a subsidy of $1.5 million, and that covers the cost of staffing and events and all those other things that take place in that facility that operate at a loss. And essentially the loss in that facility is 1.5. The direction would be between tourism and the event center, which this would be a partnership in hosting, that they're going to absorb that loss with the other losses that they incur within that year, and that they need to prepare for and budget for it.
If there is a loss.
If there was a
there's a
loss.
loss.
And if there's a surplus, it's returned back to the city at the end of the year.
Councillor Parslow, then Councillor Wilbur?
Yeah, I would support the motion if it was referenced that the organisers, the entities, NCLGA and Minerals, whatever they call themselves, they're responsible for the loss. I don't see why the taxpayer, through any fund, because ultimately the funding that tourism has, that the Spectra has, is ultimately taxpayer money.
Councillor Wilbur?
So for, I won't name the community, but way back when, once upon a time, there was a community that hosted the NCLGA AGM, and they did take a loss, and NCLGA is the one who ate it, not the community. It was NCLGA itself that did not make any money at their AGM that year. They took the loss. They had to cover that. So I'm not sure how Minerals North works, but I know with NCLGA, it's their budget. They would work with the host, which would be tourism, and they will come up with a budget, and the expectation will be that they will meet that budget. And they do have a checkpoint system along the way to make sure the sponsorship's there, the money's there, the members are paid. So they don't work towards having a loss, they work towards having a profit. But it has happened, and they ate the loss themselves, not the community.
Councillor Earl?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just, one last point I'd make is I appreciate how keen everybody is to make sure we're not exposing the taxpayers to any more liability. Having said that, this realistically is not, so this isn't the event center's first rodeo. They know how, like I said, there's a huge food and beverage component, and that's not a difficult thing to budget for. Of all the events and risk that the event center assumes throughout the year, events like this are not ones we really need to worry about losing money on.
Thank you. Ready for Councillor Parsons, one last?
Notwithstanding anything that's been said, I think it's good to be explicit around expectations, just to safeguard. I mean, I have high confidence in NCLGA, what Shirley said. Minerals, whatever they call themselves, I'm sure they're a bona fide organisation, but it's good to be explicit.
Councillor Laxton?
Just a quick follow-up before the vote. I understand the motion is that we're going to support the application to host both of these. If there is a loss, it is not council that is underwriting that loss, but it would be built into the pursuit of this, whether it be through discussions with Spectra and NCLGA or Minerals North. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Enough discussion, ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried, thank you. And the PRA sheet that was handed out, and so we have that on, Duncan?
Sorry, through your worship, we do have the RCMP, unless you wanted to leave that one. We had a request of reconsideration of the RCMP members that did come forward. There was a request in that presentation to reconsider the RCMP nomination.
Okay. I didn't get that, but
sorry.
No.
Was it?
Okay, so we're,
Sure.
the delegation came and made that request. The council would make that reconsideration. Councillor Laxton?
I need some clarification. During the last meeting, we had a number of letters that requested our arts funding be thought of reconsider. I don't believe there was anything.
Received for information.
Received for information, which then made the issue and left it in the hands of council. So regardless of what happens with this, if this was received for information, council went out and before the final budget, anything is open at this point, correct?
Right.
Yeah, so through your worship, March 20th, again, we have that special meeting, and that's where we will be requesting some final decision points in order to move forward, submit letters, change bylaws, etc. So that would be the final date.
Yeah.
Can I
Councillor Parsons?
I move in the spirit of what's just been said there that we take this presentation and consider it March the 20th.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Wilbur, so that we take the consideration, the presentation made today by Karina, and we use, council will consider that in the March 20th budget deliberation.
Yeah, so through your worship, I'll be requesting a letter. There are some timelines with the RCMP if we are requesting a reduction in staffing, so I would need confirmation on March 20th.
Okay.
But that also gives us time then to hear from the public this evening.
Councillor Laxton?
Are we doing that with all the other cuts we've made then? And the information and delegations we've received here? I just want some continuity for us versus picking one.
So we haven't done that. We've just received those motions were just strictly for information. This is directing it to this presentation to the March 20th meeting for consideration. So Councillor Parslow, then Councillor
I
Laxton.
appreciate all this. I'm treating this, and my intention is to treat this the same way the letters.
Okay.
We receive for information. However, the budget isn't over until whatever. So we will be presumably, we've got a public meeting tonight. Staff has characteristically We've got the topics that were raised, our response to the topics. So it's an ongoing process, but I don't see it. My intention is not that we treat this separately.
Okay.
So thank you for the March the 20th collaborative. But I'm assuming that any council member can bring up any matter that they think they want to have some further cuts, perhaps, before we finalise the budget, or cancellations and cuts. Right?
So motion to receive for information would be in order.
Okay.
Motion to receive for information, and
Revisit on the 20th.
final decisions are going to be made on March 20. So,
Yeah, receive for information.
good. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
I
And
was.
finally, we have the sheet on the historical allocation of the PRA, capital versus operational.
Yeah, so maybe we could just pull it up here and then it's easier to kind of point. We'll grab that pointer.
There were two sheets, Your Worship. One was,
I just got the one.
okay.
We got them. We all got them.
We all got them.
Yeah. I think both would be.
I looked at, they were emailed too.
Yeah.
Yes, they were all
I looked at them through my email.
Yeah, I just didn't get the second one. I got it last week, but I don't have it with me. I just got this first one. Oh, sorry. I've got it.
It's pretty small.
There it is. I'm good. So go ahead, Duncan.
Sure. So I'll probably ask Flavia, but the short story is staff were requested to provide a historical view on our reserves and the use of our reserves. So the top table, and I'll point it out here, this top table is really the balance at the end of the year. So for instance, starting with 2008, or sorry, 2000 and, I can't read it, I think it's 2008, yes?
Yeah.
So 2008, the balance was $175,000, and then if you move down to 2009 in the bottom table, that is the transfers that happened as part of the 2009 budget, and then if you move back up to the top table, that was the ending balance. So the bottom table captures the transfers, the ins and outs, where money went, and the top table just shows that end of year balance essentially. And I'm using general as an example, but it's the case for operating. You see where significant capital projects came out. You can see where different transfers happened, and kind of why we sit where we do today. Is that clear, or is there, and maybe Flavia, is there anything else you want to add on that? So really the two tables work together. The top table 2008, 2009 would be your transfers, and then the top table 2009 would be the result of those transfers, and so forth.
So, a question, thank you, Your Worship. Then, and following through, Duncan, when I look at the transfer, if I go to the bottom table,
Yep.
and I'm going a year ahead, actually, obviously, you'd see 07 on the top table. The transfer in 08 would have been 1.371 million.
Yeah, I don't have the 07 in front of me,
Sorry, I'm looking at the 08.
He's just saying the
though.
balance.
I'm saying I don't have that.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. So after transfers took place at the beginning of 2008, the end of 2008, the remaining surplus in general revenue fund was $175,000. Otherwise, it would have been, 1 point whatever on top of what we had.
Okay, but what I'm reading though, and I just want to be clear, is on the bottom graph in 2008, that means that 1.371 would have been transferred from reserve into the operating budget. At the end of that year, we had 175,000.
In the reserve.
Right, and following through. So those are the two, and the reason I asked for the request, my real issue is understanding the general revenue fund versus the capital. It's to balance the operating budget. What surpluses did we need to carry forward to balance the budget? That was the gist of my question. So in a nutshell, if you took the bottom line of 08, went up to 09, you're going to be a year behind, a year ahead. And okay, if that made it any clearer.
And as far, sorry, through your worship, as far as using surplus capital is very difficult because there would be certain projects that were coming out of those
Yes.
reserves,
Exactly, yeah.
especially water and sewer. General is really what was coming out of the accumulated surplus, could have been accumulated over however many years. That's what was coming out to offset the operational costs.
So if I could just follow through with one last question. As we work through that table and we bounce back and forth, and Flavia, thank you, it's a great table, it helps, I think. If I was to look at 2018, we are going to move $711,000, 139 to the 19 side. We just don't know where 19 will end, correct?
Yeah,
Thank you.
735.
And that's to balance the budget. That's part of the concern we're gonna talk about tonight, I think. Just to say, what do we do together as a community to get, things maybe where people want them to go, so. These decisions, many people have asked me, Your Worship, and I'm talking on and on, but gee, what happened? Who made the wrong? Nobody's made the wrong decisions. Decisions have been made based on what the people wanted in the city. The issue is, can we afford the sustainability of the wants of the community?
Communities build great infrastructure, great assets, great facilities. They're very expensive to operate. And the more you add things that you do onto services you provide, somebody's got to pay for them. And over the last 10 or 15 years, we've added amazing infrastructure, amazing facilities, but we've also added operating costs into them.
If I could just close with this, I would think this, as well as the next sheet we look at, would be a very valuable part of the presentation this evening so that people could see. Maybe there are going to be people out there that think we can continue to use surplus to balance the budget. That's not sustainable in any financial person's mind that I'm aware of, but we have to address these tough issues.
We currently don't have this as part of the presentation tonight. We just developed it on Friday.
Would it be possible to put into it? I mean, I know it's short notice, but I think it's a worthy topic to show, just to make sure people understand where we're at. I think it helps.
On a board? We could put it on a board.
I was gonna say, if it's on a board in the room, then people could ask questions.
Okay.
We could talk to them.
Sure.
And sorry, I didn't send the PRA breakdown over to Sabrina, but I can if that was something else council wanted to look at. I can do that relatively quickly.
I mean, I have followed that one through, again, a very good sheet, so unless, I've had my questions answered on this, but if there's other discussion,
We're going to talk about it in some detail tonight, about PRA and why and what we're doing in terms of that allocation and how we're moving the direction that council have set towards moving that PRA allocation from operating to general, and why that's driving some of the decisions we're making today. So I'm going to talk about that in a fair amount tonight.
and I think the key to that sheet, if I could, in going through this, is the discussion, and as we read the sheet, the transfer to operations with debt servicing and the transfer to operations without debt servicing. We run about a $2.3 million debt servicing payment through our operations. So when it changes the percentage of what goes into operating substantially when we talk about the inclusion of that.
Good. Thank you.
I just,
Go ahead.
you know the little brochure that you produce?
Yep.
I think I was sharing this with Blair when we bumped into each other at Safeway. That little brochure, the line items that I get most questions about, and they're not many, but those people who do engage me, maybe a handful, they just go away wondering, how come that you've got all these budget problems when you've got such a big surplus? And I'm able to answer in part. Some of that is deferred capital, right? Projects that we budgeted for, the project is still ongoing, it's incomplete, or it wasn't begun. They can accept that. The rest, I don't know how to answer.
Duncan?
So through your
I'm not
worship.
wishing to belabor it, I'm
Sure.
just sharing that on some things I can give very clear answers, and they seem to accept it. But where's the rest of the surplus, right? Well, I know we have to have a surplus. We can't have a deficit. B, we have to often, we don't get our tax money until halfway through the year, and therefore we need to have some reserves to pay for ongoing expenses should we run short, rather than borrowing the money. They can understand that, but the rest of, and I'm not worried about it, okay? This is not an issue with me. And of course, with the debt stuff, one of our strategies associated with that is that we are working to make our debt less of a draw, so we have more money for capital.
Thank you. So we'll bring that forward tonight on a information board, and good. So that's it for Mayor's business. Diary?
Nothing to update, Your Worship.
Your Worship, on that, we've just redone we're doing the OCP, all that's getting redone. Do we need to keep this on the diary? Like, all of this stuff's being worked through the OCP and our bylaws and all that stuff we're doing. Do we need to keep this on the diary?
I would love to remove it from the diary.
Do you need a motion?
Do we, so, Cindy?
That screen needs some more.
Really, Sabrina? No.
Cindy, remove it from the agenda?
Motion would-
Is it, but is there any aspects of us doing that at all? No?
To remove it.
I think
Okay.
this is a strategy for us to try to.
Okay,
get it
so
back.
moved by Councillor Wilbur, seconded, that we
this-
remove from the agenda. Councillor Earl, discussion?
And as no, Councillor Pargo, it's not a strategy to forget about it. I think we're working through it through the OCP and our bylaws, and we are doing it, so it just, to me, seems redundant to have it there.
Okay.
I said she's been bought off by admin.
All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried, thank you.
Nobody could
Consent
afford
calendar,
that.
we've had a couple of answers from our letter that we sent out on the Climate Accountability Campaign. I've had a couple of phone calls, so it's generating some discussion. We need a motion for approve the consent calendar. Councillor
moved.
Wilbur, seconded Councillor Earl. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Strategic priorities. Media question period. Anything, Austin? We need a motion to recess to close, please. Councillor Lexstrom, seconded Councillor Kemp. All in favor? Thank you. We'll take 5 minutes and go to close.